In the mid-1800s in Victorian Britain, bare-knuckle boxers fought for over 100 rounds with no gloves, facing broken faces, mangled jaws, and certain death while the crowd roared. These fighters rose from the humblest working-class origins to become the greatest sporting superstars of their day, fighting for the honour to be the very first undisputed champion of the world. Here's what life was really like as a Victorian boxer. Okay, so, if you're here a lot, you know I ask for likes and subscribes, but seriously, where are you guys? Comment your location and time. Sometimes I see someone from California listening at 3 p.m. and I'm like, are you napping? Tonight's stop, Victorian boxing rings. Hold up though. Get cozy first. Adjust those pillows. Pull up that blanket. Trust me, once we get going, you won't want to move. The blood is everywhere. On your knuckles, in your eyes, dripping down your chin. You blink hard, trying to clear your vision. The roar of the crowd comes in waves, one moment deafening, the next oddly distant. Your mouth tastes like copper pennies. 3 of your teeth feel loose and your right eye has swollen nearly shut. Welcome to London 1847. You're a bare-knuckle boxer and you're in the middle of the fight of your life. The man across from you doesn't look much better. His face is a mess of red pulp where your left hook connected 2 rounds ago. His nose sits at an unnatural angle. That was from round 17. You've been fighting for nearly 2 hours now and neither of you shows any sign of quitting. Round 64. The timekeeper shouts. You think about the thin straw mattress waiting for you back in the room you rent above the Fighting Cock pub. Not like your warm, comfortable bed right now. Your actual home is barely more than a closet with a window, but it's the first place you've ever had to yourself, and you've earned every penny of the rent through blood and broken bones. You okay there, Jackie boy? Your corner man whispers as he splashes water on your face between rounds. He's a former fighter himself, one eye milky white from an old injury, knuckles permanently swollen into gnarled lumps. Never better, you croak, though your ribs scream in protest with each breath. I spent 3 months researching Victorian boxing for this story, and let me tell you, these guys were a different breed. Our modern boxers are tough, but these bare-knuckle fighters, absolutely insane levels of endurance. See, in today's boxing, you've got weight classes, padded gloves, rounds that last a clean 3 minutes with nice 1-minute breaks. But in Victorian bare-knuckle fighting, a round only ended when someone hit the ground. Could be 30 seconds, could be 15 minutes of non-stop punishment. The crazy part is that hitting the ground was often a strategy. When you needed a breather, you might take a light hit and go down deliberately just to get that 30-second recovery period. Imagine playing that game for 60, 70, sometimes over 100 rounds. Time, the referee calls, and you're back on your feet swaying slightly. Your opponent, Butcher Bill, they call him, lunges forward with a wild right hand. You see it coming. One benefit of fighting this long, you learn each other's patterns and slip to the side, letting his fist sail past your ear. The move costs him his balance, and you drive a sharp left into his exposed ribs. The crowd explodes. You can make out individual voices now. Break his bloody jaw, boy. Finish him, Butcher. 10 quid on the young one. I know what you're thinking. Why would anyone do this? Good question. For most fighters, it was one of the only ways out of soul-crushing poverty. In Victorian Britain, if you were born poor, you'd almost certainly die poor, unless you had a special talent. And for some men, that talent was violence. Most bare-knuckle boxers came from the working class. Butchers, blacksmiths, dock workers, guys who grew up doing hard physical labour and fighting in the streets. For them, boxing wasn't just sport. It was one of the few chances to escape a life of grinding poverty. Take Tom Spring, born Tom Winter in rural Herefordshire in 1795. His father was a butcher, taught young Tom to box by making him punch a bag hanging from an apple tree. When legendary boxer Tom Cribb discovered him at an amateur match, Spring was offered the chance of a lifetime to train in London under the champion himself. At 18 years old, Spring left behind the only home he'd ever known for the smoke, noise and filth of London, a city that would chew up and spit out most country boys. Jesus, you mutter as Butcher Bill lands a heavy blow to your shoulder. The impact sends a jolt of pain down to your fingertips. You clinch with him, grabbing his sweat-slick body to buy a moment's rest. Up close, you can smell the gin on his breath, the blood and sweat soaking both your bodies. His eye is swollen, completely shut now, and a gash above his other eye keeps seeping blood. Despite his corner's attempts to close it, the referee breaks you apart and you resume the brutal dance. You're fighting at a place called the Fives Court, one of London's premier boxing venues. It's not much more than a large room with benches arranged in a square, but today it's packed with everyone from street urchins who snuck into actual aristocracy wearing silk top hats. That's the weird thing about boxing in this era. It draws from every social class, while working class folk crowd the back. The fancy, what they call boxing enthusiasts from the upper classes, sit up front in their fine clothes, betting obscene amounts of money on the outcome. And speaking of betting, the gambling on these fights is absolutely wild. More money might change hands during a championship bout than most workers would see in a lifetime. Prize fights were often called mills, as in they were money mills for gamblers and promoters. Lord Palmerston, the actual Prime Minister of Britain, was a huge boxing fan. So was Lord Byron, one of the most famous poets of the day. Charles Dickens wrote about prize fighting. These high society types slumming it at bloody bare-knuckle bouts is kinda like if today's tech billionaires and Hollywood celebrities were all obsessed with underground fight clubs. Butcher Bill's legs are looking wobbly now. You've been working his body for the last several rounds and it's starting to pay off. Your own arms feel like they're filled with lead, but you force yourself to keep them up. He's fading, your corner man hisses in your ear. Don't let up now. The thing about bare-knuckle fighting is that it was as much about endurance as power. Modern boxing matches go a maximum of 12 rounds, but Victorian fights, the famous 1860 championship bout between Tom Sayers and John Carmel Heenan, went for 37 punishing rounds over more than 2 hours, and it only ended because the crowd broke into the ring when Heenan started strangling Sayers over the ropes. I mean, picture that scene. Two guys have been beating each other senseless for hours, and then one starts choking the other with the ropes, and the crowd just loses it and storms the ring. The fight was declared a draw amid chaos, but both men were national heroes after that. Sayers in England and Heenan in America. You land a perfect right cross that snaps Butcher Bill's head back. For a moment he stands frozen, then his eyes roll back and he drops to the dirt floor like a sack of coal. The crowd erupts. Your cornerman leaps over the rope, lifting your arm in victory as the referee counts. Bill isn't getting up this time. Ladies and gentlemen, the ring announcer shouts. Your winner in 64 rounds, the fighting footman, Jack Riley. Money changes hands all around the room. You're too exhausted to celebrate properly, but you know what this means. A bigger purse, a better reputation, and matches against higher-ranked fighters. From a medical standpoint, these fights were absolute nightmares. One surgeon who studied the injuries said the punches could damage eyebrow, nose, rip off an ear, break teeth, smash jaw, and that a blow to the neck could fracture the windpipe and voice box. Broken ribs could puncture lungs, causing internal bleeding. And there were no real doctors at ringside, just experienced cornermen who might throw water on you, give you a sip of brandy, and maybe set a broken nose with their thumbs before sending you back out. Your cornerman wipes your face with a damp cloth. Good work, lad. Rest up. Promoter wants to talk terms for your next fight. And that's the business of it. No time to heal properly. Your body is your only asset, and you've got to keep fighting to earn. Most boxers from this era died young, from injuries, alcohol, or the general hard living that came with the fighting life. Back in your small room above the fighting cock, you inspect the damage. 2 possibly broken ribs, a gash above your left eye that probably needs stitches but will have to make do with a plaster, knuckles swollen to twice their normal size. You carefully unwrap the strips of cloth you bound your hands with before the fight. No gloves in bare-knuckle boxing, just thin strips of cloth to provide some minimal protection to the knuckles. Didn't help much. Your hands look like raw meat. The landlady, Mrs. Higgins, knocks and enters, without waiting for a response. She's carrying a basin of hot water and some clean rags. "Saw the fight," she says gruffly, setting down her supplies. "Not bad for a skinny lad. Need help with them cuts?" She doesn't wait for an answer, already dabbing at your face with a wet cloth. The water in the basin quickly turns pink. "Thank you, ma'am," you manage. "Don't thank me. Rent's going up a shilling now you're winning proper fights." She's not entirely joking, but her hands are surprisingly gentle as she cleans your wounds. Despite all its brutality, bare-knuckle boxing actually had rules. The London prize ring rules established in the 1740s and refined in 1838. They banned eye gouging and biting. Yeah, they had to specifically outlaw those, but allowed wrestling moves, throws, and fibbing. Which is when you'd grab an opponent by the neck or hair and just pummel him repeatedly. Super civilized stuff, clearly. The training methods were just as brutal and rudimentary as the fighting itself. Fighters would run miles each day, often carrying weights. They'd punch bags filled with grain or sand. They'd spar without gloves to condition their hands. Diet wasn't exactly scientific either. A typical fighter's diet included lots of meat, especially beef and mutton, bread, vegetables, and beer. Yes, beer was considered training food. Some fighters would consume a gallon or more of beer daily during training, believing it provided strength and energy. In some ways, they weren't wrong. When your diet lacks calories and nutrition, the carbs and calories in beer actually helped. But obviously, the alcohol part wasn't doing them any favours for recovery. As you lie on your thin mattress that night, every inch of your body aching, you stare at the ceiling and calculate your earnings. After paying your trainer and cornermen, you've cleared £6, about half a year's wages for an average labourer, earned in a single afternoon. Not bad for a former footman who used to earn scraps serving aristocrats. Tomorrow you'll barely be able to move, but tonight you've got enough to eat well, pay your rent, and maybe even send something home to your mother. You drift off to sleep thinking about the next fight, the next opponent, the next chance to climb a little higher in this brutal world. This is the life you've chosen, or perhaps the life that chose you. Outside your window, London continues its chaotic dance. Street vendors hawking their wares, carriages clattering over cobblestones, drunken arguments spilling out from pubs. The greatest city in the world, filthy, glorious and unforgiving. In Victorian Britain, life was relentlessly hard for the working class. 12-hour workdays, 6 days a week, in factories, mines or docks. Children as young as 5 or 6 working alongside adults. No safety regulations, no healthcare, no safety net if you got injured. For someone with fighting skills, the prize ring offered a desperate sort of hope. Top fighters could earn more in one bout than most workers made in years. but it came at a terrible physical cost. Even the greatest champions rarely made it to old age. Tom Sayers, one of the most famous boxers of the era, died at 39 from tuberculosis, diabetes, and the effects of alcohol. His American opponent, John Carmel Heenan, made it to 38 before tuberculosis took him too. Yet when Sayers died, his funeral procession was one of the largest London had ever seen. Over 100,000 people lined the streets to pay their respects, a testament to how deeply prize fighting had embedded itself in Victorian culture. As your consciousness fades, you realise that for better or worse, you're part of this world now. The blood, the pain, the roaring crowd, the desperate gamble for a better life, all of it sewn together into the patchwork fate of a Victorian boxer. The last thought that passes through your mind before sleep claims you is simple. I wonder how long I can last in this game before it kills me. Unlike you in your comfortable modern bed right now, sleep for a Victorian boxer wasn't about relaxation but recovery. The desperate need to heal enough to fight again. As you drift off to sleep in your safe, warm home, miles and centuries away from those brutal rings, perhaps you can appreciate just how far we've come. And yet, something about their raw courage, their willingness to stand toe-to-toe and test the very limits of human endurance, still calls to something primal in us. Maybe that's why these stories of the first fighting champions still captivate us, even as we wince at their brutality. Sleep well. There's more to this story tomorrow. Dawn breaks through your grimy window, painting your small room in dirty gold. Your body screams in protest as you force yourself to sit up. Each breath sends daggers through your ribs. Your knuckles have scabbed overnight, tight and painful. This is the morning after victory. Feels a lot like defeat. Up, you lazy mongrel. A loud bang on your door. Ned Clark, your trainer. No rest for the wicked. You grunt in response, which he takes as an invitation to barge in. Ned's a tank of a man, 50 years old, with cauliflower ears and a permanently broken nose that whistles when he breathes. 20 years ago he was a champion. Now he makes champions, or tries to. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, he says, surveying your battered face. You look like hammered shit. Feel worse, you manage, voice like gravel. Good. Pain means you're alive. He tosses a bundle onto your bed. Clean yourself up. Got you eggs and steak at the butcher's. You need red meat to build the blood back. This was actual medical advice in the 1840s, by the way. Fighters believed red meat built blood after a fight, and they weren't entirely wrong. The iron and protein did help recovery, even if they didn't understand the science behind it. See, medical knowledge around boxing injuries was primitive at best. No ice packs, no anti-inflammatories, no physical therapy, just raw eggs, red meat, whiskey for the pain, and maybe some herbal poultices your trainer swore by. Got us a meeting, Ned says, watching you struggle to pull on your shirt. Man with money wants to talk. 2 hours, the rose and crown. Not fighting again for weeks, you protest. Your body couldn't take it. Ned snorts. Course not, you daft bastard. You're meat for at least a month, but we need to strike while you're hot. Yesterday's win put eyes on you. The bundle he brought contains a fresh shirt, slightly too big but cleaner than anything you own, and a small jar of pungent-smelling salve. For them hands, he explains. Old gypsy remedy, horse fat, beeswax, and God knows what else. Don't ask, just rub it in. You force down breakfast at the pub downstairs. 3 barely cooked eggs and a slab of bloody steak. The protein helps, but your jaw aches with every chew. The landlady brings you tea with honey, a kindness you hadn't expected. For your throat, lad, she says. You took some hits there. This was the life cycle of a Victorian fighter. Brutal combat followed by desperate recovery, trying to heal enough before financial necessity forced you back into the ring. Many fought while still injured from previous bouts, accumulating damage that would eventually end their careers or their lives. While today's boxers might take months between fights, Victorian pugilists often fought every few weeks. The human body simply can't heal that quickly, especially without modern medicine. Every fighter carried injuries from their last bout into their next one. The cumulative damage was catastrophic. Walking to your meeting takes effort. Your legs are stiff, your back aches, and the bright morning light makes your head pound. Every passerby seems to stare, some with admiration, others with disgust. Your face is a public advertisement for your profession. The Rose and Crown is a step up from your usual haunts, cleaner with actual glass in the windows instead of oiled paper. Ned is already there, nursing a pint and chatting with a well-dressed gentleman. "Ah, here he is," Ned booms as you approach. "My promising young fighter, Jack Riley." The gentleman turns, appraising you with cold efficiency. He's maybe 40, wearing a tailored suit and gold watch chain. His hands are soft, uncalloused. He's never worked a day in his life. Not with those hands. "Mr. Holmes," Ned introduces him, "businessman and sporting enthusiast. You've learned enough to know what that means. A gambler, a man who makes money from other men's blood." "Sit, young man," Holmes says, gesturing to a chair. "That was impressive work yesterday. 64 rounds against the butcher. Most wouldn't last 20. You mumble thanks, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. "I'll be direct," Holmes continues, sipping port despite the early hour mail. "You have talent, but no management. Mr. Clark here is an excellent trainer, but you need backing to reach the top ranks." He's not wrong. Boxing in Victorian England was as much about connections as talent. The best fights, the biggest purses, they went to fighters with powerful patrons, men who could arrange matches, handle promotion, place strategic bets. I should mention, these businessmen weren't always on the up and up. Boxing operated in a legal grey area, and many patrons had connections to gambling networks, criminal enterprises, and corrupt officials who could be paid to look the other way when a fight was arranged. "I can arrange 3 fights in the next year," Holmes explains. "Proper fights with proper purses. £200 for the first, 3 for the second, 5 for the third, assuming you win, of course." Your head spins at the numbers. £500 is a fortune, more than most working men would see in a decade. It's a path out of poverty, not just for you, but for your whole family. "What's your cut?" Ned asks bluntly. Holmes smiles thinly. 40% of winnings plus betting privileges. 30, Ned counters, and we get 10% of your betting profits. The two men haggle while you sit in silence, still trying to process what's happening. Yesterday you were fighting for a £6 purse, now they're discussing hundreds. "So he'd need to go to Bristol for the first fight," Holmes is saying. "There's a man there, Jenkins. Strong but slow. Good match for our boy." "Bristol," you finally speak up. "That's 100 miles. Holmes looks at you like you're a particularly slow child. "Yes, and Manchester for the second, likely London for the third. Did you think you'd become champion fighting the same dock workers and butchers' boys forever?" He has a point. The boxing circuit stretched across Britain, with fighters travelling between major cities for important bouts. This wasn't easy in the 1840s. Travel meant uncomfortable stagecoaches or the relatively new railways, which were still expensive. Many fighters had never travelled more than a few miles from their birthplace before boxing took them on the road. The meeting ends with handshakes and a signed agreement, your X mark on a document you can't read, promising your fighting future to a man you just met. Ned seems pleased, though, and you trust his judgment more than your own in these matters. This changes everything, he tells you as you leave. No more back alley scraps. You're moving up, Jackie boy. The deal made, Ned drags you to his training quarters, a converted stable behind another pub. Despite your protests that you need to rest, he insists you start preparing immediately. Champion ain't made in the ring, he says, handing you a rope. Champion's made in training. You start skipping, an exercise fighters have used for centuries to build footwork and stamina. Every jump sends pain through your ribs, but you grit your teeth and continue. After 10 minutes, you're drenched in sweat and struggling to breathe. Pathetic, Ned comments, though not unkindly. 5 more minutes, then the bag. The bag is a canvas sack filled with sand hanging from a beam. Not the refined equipment of modern gyms. This thing is hard as stone and rough enough to take more skin off your already damaged knuckles. Not with the hands, you protest, showing him your split knuckles. Then practice blocking, he says without sympathy. Arms up, elbows in, move your feet. You took too many hits yesterday because you stand flat-footed like a damn statue. Victorian training methods were brutal but effective in their own way. They didn't have the scientific understanding of exercise physiology we have today, but they recognized the fundamentals: build strength, improve endurance, develop technique through endless repetition. A typical training regimen involved running, often while carrying weights, skipping rope for footwork and stamina, punching heavy bags or pads, sparring, though not too often before fights, weight work with primitive dumbbells or medicine balls, diet focused on meat and bread for protein and energy. By noon, you're completely spent. Ned finally relents, sending you to sit while he brings bread and cheese for lunch. You did good yesterday, he says, his gruff voice softening slightly. Real good, but Jenkins is a different class of fighter. He's been at it 10 years, fought everyone from Liverpool to Plymouth, knows every dirty trick in the book. You think I can beat him? You ask between mouthfuls. Ned considers this, head tilted. If we train right and fight smart, yeah. You're faster, younger, hungrier, but he'll hurt you worse than the butcher did. Need to be ready for that. The next few weeks fall into a painful rhythm. Up at dawn for a 5-mile run, regardless of weather. Breakfast of eggs, steak, and bread. 2 hours of bag work, skipping and strength exercises. Rest at midday, then more training in the afternoon. Sparring twice weekly with local fighters Ned brings in. Your hands never fully heal. A fighter's hands rarely did in this era. Instead, the skin over your knuckles gradually hardens into callus, bones underneath permanently swollen. You learn to ignore the constant pain, to fight through it. One evening, Ned takes you to a gentleman's club. Not the kind with dancing girls, but the kind with rich men in smoking jackets. You feel profoundly out of place in your clean but threadbare clothes, standing awkwardly while Ned talks to potential backers. Just stand there and look dangerous, he had instructed you. Don't talk unless asked a direct question. These toffs want a fighting animal, not a conversation partner, and that's exactly how they treat you, like a prized but slightly dangerous animal. They inspect your build, comment on your reach, discuss your prospects as if you're not standing right there. One man even grabs your arm without asking, squeezing your bicep to assess your strength. You nearly deck him on instinct before Ned's warning glare stops you. Strong lad, the man comments to Ned, but how's his stamina past 40 rounds? Like a bloody steam engine, Ned boasts. Butcher Bill couldn't break him in 64. I might put £50 on him for Bristol, if he looks good in training next week. This part of boxing hasn't changed much over the centuries. The uncomfortable dynamic where fighters, especially those from working-class backgrounds, are treated as commodities by the moneyed classes who finance the sport. In Victorian England, this class divide was even more pronounced. Boxers were entertainment for the wealthy, who placed massive bets on the outcomes. Some aristocrats genuinely loved the sport and respected its participants, but many simply viewed fighters as vessels for gambling, disposable once they stopped winning. What has changed is the level of protection for the athletes. Modern boxers have managers, contracts, medical supervision. Victorian fighters had, well, men like Ned doing their best, but often out of their depth against the power brokers. "We leave for Bristol in 3 days, Ned tells you, as you walk home. Holmes is arranging everything. Train light tomorrow, rest the day after. Need you sharp. The journey to Bristol takes a full day by railway, your first time on a train. Under normal circumstances, you might have enjoyed the novelty. Instead, you spend the journey staring out the window, mind consumed with the coming fight. Jenkins has a reputation. They call him the Hammer, for his powerful right hand that's supposedly broken 3 men's jaws. 15 years in the prize ring, only 4 losses in over 30 fights. A local hero in Bristol with a passionate following. You're the unknown outsider, brought in as fresh meat. Bristol is bigger than you expected, a bustling port city with ships from around the world crowding its harbour. Holmes has arranged lodgings at an inn near the docks. Not fancy, but clean enough. You and Ned share a room to save money. The morning of the fight, you wake before dawn, stomach churning with nerves. Ned makes you eat. Dry toast and tea, nothing that might come back up in the ring. Then a short walk to loosen your muscles, careful not to tire yourself. The fight venue is a converted warehouse. By noon, it's packed with spectators, dock workers and merchants standing shoulder to shoulder with gentlemen in fine coats. The noise is deafening as you make your way to the ring, a simple roped-off square with sawdust covering the wooden floor. Jenkins is already there, circling inside the ropes. He's older than you expected, late 30s at least, with greying hair at his temples, but his body is a mass of ropey muscle, and his face is a roadmap of scar tissue. This man has absorbed more punishment than you've ever dealt out. The formalities are brief. The referee, a portly man with impressive whiskers, calls you both to the centre. Clean fight, gentlemen. No hits below the belt, no gouging. Fight ends when one man can't continue or concedes. Jenkins stares at you with flat, emotionless eyes. The eyes of a man who's done this too many times to feel anything anymore. "I'll try not to kill you, boy," he says quietly. "No money in corpses." You return to your corner where Ned gives last-minute instructions you barely hear over the roaring in your ears. Then the bell rings, actually a hammer striking an iron bar, and it begins. Jenkins comes out cautiously, more technical than Butcher Bill. He circles, tests your defense with light jabs, looking for weaknesses. You respond in kind, remembering Ned's advice. First 5 rounds, just stay safe. Learn his patterns. He's old. Make him work. The early rounds are tense but uneventful. Jenkins lands some solid hits, but nothing that puts you in danger. You connect with a few good counters that seem to surprise him with their speed. "He's slowing already," Ned whispers during a break. "Old legs, but watch that right hand. He's loading it up." Ding. Round 8 is when it happens. You slip a jab, step inside, and walk straight into the right hand Ned warned you about. It catches you perfectly on the jaw, a sledgehammer blow that makes your vision explode into white stars. You're on the floor without remembering how you got there. The count reaches 7 before you can force yourself back to your feet, legs wobbling like a newborn colt's. 8, 9... "You fit to continue?" the referee asks, peering into your eyes. You nod, unable to form words. Jenkins comes in for the kill, but some animal instinct for survival takes over. You clinch, hold, survive the round through desperation alone. Sit, breathe. Ned's voice seems to come from very far away as you collapse in your corner. He presses something cold against your jaw, a metal flask filled with water. The pain recedes slightly, enough to clear your head. "I'm okay," you mumble through a mouth that feels stuffed with cotton. "Like hell you are," Ned replies, but he used a lot of energy trying to finish you. Now he's the one breathing heavy. He's right. The next round, Jenkins charges forward, but his legs have slowed, his punches coming a fraction later than before. You focus on movement, circling away from that deadly right hand, jabbing when you can, making him chase you. 2 more rounds of this, and the dynamic has shifted completely. Jenkins is gasping for air, his shots growing wild as frustration mounts. The Bristol crowd senses the change, their cheers taking on a concerned edge. In round 12, you see your opening. Jenkins throws a looping right that misses entirely, leaving him off balance. You step in with a perfect left hook to his liver, a shot Ned drilled into you for weeks. The effect is immediate and dramatic. Jenkins folds like he's been stabbed, face contorted in agony. The liver shot, as boxers well know, causes a unique kind of pain that simply can't be fought through. There's no count needed. Jenkins remains kneeling, one glove raised in surrender. The Bristol crowd falls silent for one shocked moment, then erupts, some in cheers, others in angry shouts. You've just become the most hated man in the city and also the most respected. As Ned wraps a blanket around your shoulders and hustles you toward the exit, you catch Holmes watching from ringside. He's smiling as he collects what looks like a considerable amount of money from several ashen-faced gentlemen. "Did we just make an enemy?" you ask Ned, nodding toward the grumbling Bristol crowd. Ned grins, exposing his missing teeth. "Nah, you just made a reputation." In your room that night, counting your share of the purse, more money than you've ever possessed at one time, you realize something has fundamentally changed. You're not just fighting for survival anymore. You've entered a world where men like you can rise, can make a name, can perhaps even secure a future beyond the ring. It's a dangerous world, one that breaks most who enter it. But tonight, bandaging your hands and replaying the perfect liver shot that crumpled Jenkins, you allow yourself to believe you might be different. You might be the one who survives. On the train back to London the next morning, Ned spreads a newspaper between you. Your fight gets a full column, complete with a crude illustration of Jenkins kneeling in defeat. "The Fighting Footman Conquers Bristol," reads the headline. "You're famous now," Ned says, unable to hide his pride. "Manchester will be tougher, though. Alan's a proper fighter, not an aging brawler like Jenkins." As the English countryside rolls past the window, you realise you've crossed a threshold. There's no going back to anonymity, to small fights in local pubs. For better or worse, you're now part of the spectacle of the prize ring, that bloody theatre where men like you live and die for the entertainment of others. And somewhere deep in your mind, past the pain and swelling pride, a small voice wonders, how long until someone does to you what you just did to Jenkins? Word of your victory spreads fast. When you return to London, the Fighting Cock is buzzing with energy. People who never gave you a second glance now slap your back, buy you drinks, ask for details about Jenkins' famous right hand. "Was he as tough as they say?" an eager dock worker asks, eyes wide. "Tougher," you answer, nursing your ale. His punches felt like being kicked by a horse. You're a local celebrity now, at least in the grimy pubs and boxing halls of working-class London. It's a strange feeling. For years you were invisible, just another poor boy scrapping for pennies. Now men whisper as you pass, women give you second glances, and publicans offer free drinks in hopes you'll grace their establishment with your growing fame. Fame, however, doesn't heal broken ribs or split knuckles. 3 weeks after Bristol, you're still wincing with certain movements. Ned notices, of course, nothing escapes his fighter's eyes. "Need to strengthen them ribs before Manchester," he says one morning as you grimace during rope work. Alan's a body puncher. He'll target your weakness. How long we got, you ask? 3 months. Holmes set the date yesterday. 3 months sounds like luxury after the brutal pace of your early career. Before Ned and Holmes, you'd sometimes fight twice in a month, taking on any challenger for whatever purse was offered. "Got something new to try?" Ned says, leading you to a corner of the training room. There sits a contraption you've never seen, a large leather ball suspended between 2 platforms. "Medicine ball," he explains. "Continental training method. Boxers in France and Germany swear by it. Lie on your back. You do as instructed, and Ned drops the weighted ball onto your stomach. Not hard enough to injure, but with enough force that you instinctively contract your abdominal muscles to absorb the impact. Again," he says, catching the ball as you push it back. 100 times. Builds armor around your vitals. This is completely true, by the way. Medicine balls were one of the first pieces of specialized boxing training equipment, used since ancient times but gaining popularity in Victorian boxing circles. Like modern core training, they helped fighters develop the abdominal strength needed to absorb body blows. Training innovations were constantly being imported from different countries. The continental style Ned mentions referred to more scientific approaches being developed in France and Germany, as opposed to the rougher, more instinct-driven British methods. The next 12 weeks are the most structured training of your life. Ned has mapped out every day, balancing hard work with recovery in ways you'd never considered important. Mondays and Thursdays are for strength, medicine ball work, lifting primitive dumbbells, carrying weights while walking. Tuesdays and Fridays focus on technique, endless hours of punching the bag, practicing blocks and counters, drilling specific combinations. Wednesdays and Saturdays are for sparring, putting everything together against living opponents. Sundays, to your surprise, are for complete rest. Body doesn't build during work, Ned explains when you question this. Builds during rest. Even God took Sundays off, lad. Between sessions, your education continues in other ways. Holmes arranges for you to watch experienced fighters at various London venues, studying their techniques. You spend hours at the Fives Court and similar establishments, absorbing the subtleties of foot position, weight transfer, defensive head movement. "See how Cooper keeps his right hand high?" Ned whispers during one bout. "Old London style, different from the Liverpool fighters. They lead with the left shoulder more." Most fascinating are the regional differences in fighting styles. Just as modern boxing has distinctive national schools, Cuban, Mexican, Eastern European, Victorian boxing had city-specific approaches. London fighters typically used a more upright stance, while northern fighters often adopted a crouched position. Liverpool boxers were known for aggressiveness, Bristol fighters for technical defence. These weren't formalized styles with coaches and manuals. They evolved organically through local tradition, passed from veteran fighters to newcomers in the back rooms of pubs and makeshift gymnasiums. Your growing status also brings new attention, not all of it welcome. One evening, a well-dressed young woman approaches your table at the Fighting Cock. She's clearly not from this neighbourhood, her quality clothing and refined speech marking her as someone from a higher social class. "Mr. Riley," she says, no question in her tone. "I'm Miss Catherine Wilson with the London Illustrated News. I write profiles of interesting Londoners." You shift uncomfortably. "Don't know about interesting, miss. A former footman becoming a rising star in the prize ring?" "I assure you." Our readers would find that fascinating. Ned, returning with drinks, spots the interaction and intervenes. "No interviews before Manchester," he says firmly. "Bad luck." After she leaves, you give him a questioning look. "Newspapers," he says with disgust, "write all sorts of rubbish, true or not, and they pay nothing for the privilege of using your name. Holmes is arranging something with the Sporting Times after Manchester, a proper piece with compensation." The press played a crucial role in boxing's popularity during this era. Publications like Bell's Life in London, The Sporting Magazine, and Pierce Egan's Boxiana created celebrities out of successful fighters. Their colourful reporting, often exaggerated for effect, helped transform local fighters into national figures. For boxers from working-class backgrounds, this attention was both opportunity and hazard. The right kind of press could attract wealthy patrons and bigger fights, but it also put pressure on fighters to live up to their printed reputations, sometimes pushing them to fight when injured or take on opponents beyond their abilities. As Manchester approaches, your daily routine expands beyond just training. Holmes brings you to events where wealthy sporting enthusiasts gather, gentlemen's clubs, private dinners, exclusive gambling houses. You're paraded like an exotic specimen, your rough manners and fighting physique a source of fascination for men who've never known physical labour or genuine hunger. "Smile more," Holmes instructs before one such gathering. "They're betting men, need to look confident but not arrogant." "What do I say if they ask me questions?" you ask, adjusting the borrowed suit that doesn't quite fit your fighter's build. Say little. Be respectful. Call them sir. If they ask about Manchester, tell them you respect Alan's experience but back yourself to win. These social performances become almost as exhausting as your physical training. You're caught between worlds, no longer just a simple fighter, not remotely a gentleman. The coded behaviours and subtle hierarchies of high society are more confusing than any opponent's fighting style. At one such event, you're cornered by an elderly lord with impressive side whiskers and the ruddy complexion of a lifelong drinker. "Tell me, young man," he demands after several brandies have loosened his tongue, "what does it feel like to be hit with bare knuckles? Really feel like, I mean." You consider the question seriously. "Depends where you're hit, sir. Body blows wind you, like you can't catch your breath for what feels like forever. Headshots? Sometimes you don't feel them until after. Sometimes there's a flash of light, then nothing. Worst are the temple hits. Make your legs go all rubbery while your mind stays clear, watching yourself fall and can't do nothing about it." He listens, fascinated, like you're describing exotic travels rather than physical trauma. "Extraordinary, and you choose this life?" The question catches you off guard. Did you choose this, or did poverty and circumstance choose it for you? "It's a living, sir," you finally answer. "Better than most available to lads like me." He nods sagely, as if you've confirmed some private theory. "Remarkable creatures, you fighting men. Remarkable." As you lie in your bed that night, a proper bed now, in lodgings Holmes arranged that don't leak when it rains, you think about the Lord's question. The fighting life has given you more than you ever expected. Money in your pocket, some measure of respect, even a small taste of fame. But the cost is written in the scars on your face, the permanent swelling of your knuckles, the mornings when your joints ache like those of a man 3 times your age. Unlike you right now, cosy in your modern bed with good medical care available if you need it, Victorian boxers had no safety net, no pensions, no health insurance, no modern surgeries to repair the damage accumulated over a fighting career. Their bodies were the only capital they had, and once that capital was spent, options narrowed dramatically. Many ended up as sparring partners for younger fighters, their reflexes shot but their names still valuable enough to help train the next generation. Others became publicans if they'd managed to save enough to buy a license. Some worked as bouncers or security. The unlucky ones, broken beyond usefulness, often drank themselves to death on the charity of former admirers. You push these thoughts away. You're young, successful, improving with every fight. The darkness that awaits all fighters is still distant for you. The journey to Manchester takes longer than Bristol. A full day and night by coach and rail. Alan, your opponent, is a local hero in Manchester, undefeated in his home city. The Northern Hammer, they call him, though you wonder if every fighter named Jenkins or Allen is required by law to adopt the Hammer as their fighting moniker. Holmes has spared no expense this time, booking rooms at a respectable inn near the fighting venue. You even have your own room, a luxury that feels almost decadent after years of shared lodgings. The betting's heavy, Holmes informs you over dinner. Local money on Allen, of course. But your Bristol performance impressed enough London gentlemen to balance it out. What do they say about me, you ask, curious about your reputation? Holmes smiles thinly. That you're fast but untested, that Jenkins was past his prime, that Manchester will be a rude awakening. And what do you say? You press. I say I've wagered a considerable sum on you finishing Allen inside 20 rounds, he answers, cutting into his steak. So I very much hope Ned has prepared you adequately. The Manchester fighting venue is larger than anything you've experienced. A converted mill with high ceilings and space for nearly 1,000 spectators. By fight time, it's packed to the rafters, the noise deafening as locals cheer for their champion. Allen is waiting in the ring, a solid man in his late 20s with a methodical, balanced fighting style. Where Jenkins was a brawler who relied on power, Allen is known for his technique and stamina. He's never been knocked down in 17 professional fights. The referee calls you both to centre ring for instructions. Allen's eyes are calm, assessing. No trash talk, no intimidation, just the quiet confidence of a man who knows his business. Good luck, London, he says simply, his Manchester accent thick. You too, you respond, oddly comforted by his professionalism. The fight begins cautiously, both of you probing for weaknesses. Allen's reputation proves accurate. He's technically sound, with excellent defensive awareness and a snapping jab that keeps catching you as you try to close distance. By round 5, a pattern has emerged. Allen controls the centre of the ring, forcing you to circle and look for openings. When you do land, your punches seem to have little effect on his sturdy frame. Meanwhile, his methodical attack is slowly accumulating damage. A cut above your eye, bruising along your ribs, a rapidly swelling left ear where a hook caught you clean. Need to change the pattern, Ned tells you between rounds, working to close the cut. He's too comfortable. Make him uncomfortable. How? You ask, gratefully sucking water from a ladle. Get dirty, wrestling, inside fighting. He likes space. Take it away. This was a legitimate strategy in bare-knuckle boxing. Under London prize ring rules, wrestling moves were permitted. Fighters could clinch, grapple, and even throw their opponents to the ground. Many bouts were won through superior wrestling rather than punching power. You follow Ned's advice. Instead of boxing at Allen's preferred distance, you crowd him, tie up his arms, lean your weight on him in clinches. When he tries to establish space, you bull forward, making the fight ugly, disrupting his rhythm. The Manchester crowd hates it, booing lustily as the clean boxing match devolves into a wrestling contest. But the strategy works. Allen grows increasingly frustrated, his textbook technique less effective in a close-quarters brawl. In round 13, the fight turns. Alan, trying to create separation, pushes you hard during a clinch. As you stumble backward, he lunges forward with a right hand, but in his eagerness, he overextends. You slip the punch and counter with a short, chopping right that catches him behind the ear. It's not a powerful blow, but the placement is perfect. Alan's legs wobble momentarily, his eyes glazing. You've spent enough time around fighters to recognize the look. He's hurt, his equilibrium disrupted. You press the advantage, forcing him back toward the ropes. He recovers enough to cover defensively, but the momentum has shifted. The crowd senses it too, their boos giving way to the tense silence of collective concern. 3 more rounds of constant pressure follow. Alan, still unsteady, focuses on survival, clinching whenever you get close, taking a knee when exchanges turn against him. Each time he rises at the count of 8 or 9, breathing heavily but refusing to quit. The Manchester fans find their voice again, now cheering Alan's heart rather than his skill. "Stay up, Tommy," they chant. "Don't let the Londoner take you." Round 19 brings the end. Alan, exhausted and still fighting the effects of that shot behind the ear, drops his guard momentarily after pushing you away. You step in with a straight right hand that lands flush on his jaw. His eyes roll up, legs folding beneath him like a collapsing chair. The referee doesn't bother with a count. Alan is out cold, his undefeated Manchester record shattered. The local crowd is momentarily stunned into silence before a mix of cheers and angry shouts erupts. You're quickly surrounded by your team, Ned, Holmes, and 2 burly assistants Holmes hired for security, and hustled toward a side exit. "Outstanding," Holmes says, actually patting your shoulder. "The first physical contact he's ever initiated. 19th round. I wagered on 20 or fewer. Excellent return." In your dressing room, a luxury that didn't exist in smaller venues, you finally have a moment to process what's happened. You've just defeated an established champion on his home turf. The purse is substantial, your reputation growing with each victory. But as Ned helps you remove your hand wraps, revealing bloody knuckles and a possibly broken middle finger, you're reminded of the physical cost. Alan's precise jabs have left your face swollen and cut, and that early bodywork has you coughing painfully with deep breaths. "London next," Ned says, dabbing at a cut with surprisingly gentle hands. "Big one. Bennett himself." That gets your full attention. William, the Bulldog Bennett, is the uncrowned king of London boxing, a fighter so dominant that worthy challengers are hard to find. He hasn't lost in 5 years, and his last 3 opponents retired after facing him. "You think I'm ready?" you ask, wincing as Ned probes your ribs. "No," he answers honestly. "But Holmes has arranged it and the money's too good to pass up. 6 months to prepare. We'll make you ready." As you lie in your Manchester hotel bed that night, too wound up to sleep despite bone-deep exhaustion, you stare at the ceiling and contemplate how far you've come, from anonymous footman to challenger for the unofficial championship of London in less than 2 years. The pain that throbs through your body seems a small price for such advancement, yet a quiet voice in the back of your mind wonders if any success is worth the systematic destruction of your body. Bennett has ended careers with his fists. Some opponents never fully recovered, but that's a concern for tomorrow. Tonight, despite the pain and lingering adrenaline, your heavy eyelids finally close, carrying you into well-earned rest. Unlike you right now, warm and comfortable in your modern bed without a care in the world, Victorian fighters often went to sleep uncertain if their injuries were merely painful or genuinely serious. No X-rays to check for fractures, no MRIs for brain bleeds. Just hope, toughness, and the knowledge that tomorrow would bring more of the same. As you drift towards sleep in your clean, safe room, think about those men who willingly faced such brutality for a chance at a better life. Their courage wasn't always rewarded, but without it, they had no chance at all. London greets your return with unexpected fanfare. The sporting papers, which once ignored your existence, now feature your name prominently. The fighting footman conquers the north, screams one headline. Riley's rise continues, announces another. Holmes, ever the businessman, wastes no time capitalizing on your growing fame. He arranges a series of public exhibitions at various London sporting venues, not actual fights, but training demonstrations where the public pays to watch you skip rope, hit the bags, and spar lightly with training partners. This is ridiculous, you complain after the third such exhibition, where you performed before a crowd of nearly 200. I'm a fighter, not a circus act. You're both, Holmes corrects, counting the day's takings, and you're being well compensated for the inconvenience. He's not wrong. Your purse for these exhibitions is substantial, not fighting money, but far more than you'd have earned in a week as a footman. The boxing exhibitions were genuinely a significant source of income for Victorian fighters between matches. Similar to how modern boxers make money from promotional appearances, these exhibitions helped fighters stay financially afloat while training for major bouts. Plus, there's something else, something you'd never admit to Ned or Holmes. You're starting to enjoy the attention, the admiring glances from women, the respectful nods from men who'd have ignored you months ago, the way crowds part slightly when you enter a room, whispers following in your wake. That's him. That's Riley. Fame is a powerful intoxicant, especially for someone who spent most of their life being invisible. This newfound celebrity brings unexpected encounters. One evening, leaving an exhibition at a gentleman's sporting club, you're approached by a well-dressed man in his 50s. Something in his bearing marks him as different from the typical boxing enthusiast. An air of genuine authority rather than purchased importance. "Mr. Riley," he says, extending a hand. "Lord Queensberry, I've been following your progress with interest." You shake his hand, trying to hide your surprise. Even you recognise this name. John Douglas, the 9th Marquess of Queensberry, is one of the most influential figures in British sporting circles. An honour, my lord, you manage, grateful for Ned's endless coaching on how to address the aristocracy. "Walk with me a moment," he says, not really a request. As you fall into step beside him, he continues, "I'm working to reform prize fighting, make it a respectable sport rather than a barely legal spectacle. Rules, regulations, proper oversight, gloves, most importantly." "Gloves, my lord?" The concept seems almost comical. The raw confrontation of flesh against flesh is the entire point of prize fighting. Indeed, for safety and skill, bare-knuckle fighting is barbaric. He says this while looking directly at your face, with its collection of scars and a nose that's been broken at least twice. The future of boxing lies in technique, defense, the science of the sport rather than mere brutality. This is a historically accurate encounter. John Douglas, 9th Marquess of Queensberry, was indeed advocating for boxing reforms during this period. His name would become permanently associated with boxing through the Queensberry Rules published in 1867, which mandated the use of gloves and many other regulations that shaped modern boxing. "With respect, my lord, I earn my living through that brutality." He waves this away. Men like you could still thrive under proper rules, perhaps even extend your careers without hands too broken to make a fist by 30. He's not entirely wrong. Victorian bare-knuckle fighters often suffered debilitating hand injuries that shortened their careers. The human hand, with its delicate bones and joints, simply isn't designed to strike hard objects repeatedly without protection. Something to consider, Mr. Riley. Boxing's future will arrive whether men like you embrace it or resist it. With a polite nod, he leaves you to ponder his words. You mention the encounter to Ned later that night over pints at the Fighting Cock. Queensberry, Ned snorts. Fancy lord with fancy ideas. Wants to turn fighting into a gentleman's game. Gloves and rounds and points. He spits contemptuously. That's not fighting, that's dancing. You're surprised by his vehemence. Might be safer, though, for the hands at least. Since when is fighting supposed to be safe? Ned demands. We're prize fighters, not cricket players. The risk is part of what makes it worth watching, worth betting on. He drains his ale and fixes you with a serious stare. Listen, lad, men like Queensberry want to take fighting away from men like us. Make it respectable so gentlemen can do it without getting their pretty faces ruined. Don't be fooled. There's truth in what he says. Throughout history, when working-class activities become adopted by the upper classes, they often change in ways that exclude their original participants. Boxing would be no exception. Over the next weeks, however, you have little time to worry about boxing's future. Its present, specifically your upcoming fight with Bennett, consumes all your attention. Your training camp for Bennett is unlike anything you've experienced before. Holmes rents a small house outside London, away from the city's distractions and pollution. You, Ned, and 2 sparring partners relocate there for focused preparation. Bennett's different from anyone you've faced, Ned explains as he wraps your hands for sparring. Jenkins had power but no technique. Allen had technique but lacked killer instinct. Bennett has everything: power, skill, experience, and the mean streak of a rabid dog. Your primary sparring partner is a fighter called Murphy, chosen specifically because his style approximates Bennett's: aggressive pressure fighting with devastating body attacks. Day after day, Murphy pummels your midsection while you work to perfect your defense and counter-punching. The training is scientific by Victorian standards. Ned times rounds with a pocket watch, tracks your food intake, and even keeps a notebook recording your progress. He has you punch through buckets of sand to strengthen your hands, run with weighted vests to build endurance, and practice specific combinations hundreds of times until they become instinctive. Most important thing, Ned tells you repeatedly, is don't let Bennett back you onto the ropes. He traps fighters there, works the body until their guard drops, then goes for the head. Stay center ring, keep moving. 1 month before the fight, disaster strikes. During a particularly intense sparring session, Murphy catches you with an awkward punch to the ribs, the same ribs that have been injured and re-injured throughout your career. Something gives way with an audible crack. The pain is immediate and debilitating. You can't take a deep breath without feeling like you're being stabbed from the inside. Broken, Ned confirms after a careful examination, maybe 2 of them. Fights in 4 weeks, you remind him through gritted teeth, as if he might have forgotten. I know. His expression is grim. Got to let it heal some. No sparring until the week before. Light bag work only, and lots of walking to keep your wind. This was the brutal reality for Victorian fighters. Modern boxers might postpone a fight due to injury during training. Back then, unless you were physically unable to stand, the show went on. Contracts were signed, bets were placed, and venues were booked. An injured fighter either fought hurt or forfeited their purse and reputation. The next 3 weeks are an exercise in frustrated restraint. While your sparring partners continue full training, you're limited to walking, light technique drills, and visualization. The lack of proper preparation gnaws at your confidence. Bennett is already the most formidable opponent you've faced. Facing him at less than full strength seems like madness. "Can we postpone?" you finally ask Holmes during one of his weekly visits to check on your progress. Holmes looks at you like you've suggested cancelling Christmas. "Postpone the most anticipated fight in London? Impossible. The betting alone is over £3,000. The venue sold out in 2 days. He studies you with calculating eyes. "How bad is it, really, the rib?" "Bad enough," you admit. "Can't take a deep breath without pain." "But you can fight?" "I can fight," you confirm, hating that there's no other acceptable answer. Holmes nods, satisfied. "Then you'll fight. Ned will find a way to manage the pain." Ned's way turns out to be a tightly wrapped bandage around your torso, so constrictive it limits your breathing but stabilizes the broken ribs. He also provides a small bottle of laudanum, an opium tincture commonly used for pain in the Victorian era. "Just enough to take the edge off," he cautions. "Too much and you'll be dopey. Bennett will slaughter a dopey fighter." The week of the fight arrives with the fanfare of a major sporting event. Your name appears on posters throughout London. The sporting papers feature lengthy articles analysing your chances against the seemingly invincible Bennett. The betting odds are decidedly against you, 3-1 in Bennett's favour. Bennett himself remains ominously silent. No public statements, no boasting, no pre-fight theatrics. Just the quiet confidence of a predator who doesn't need to announce his intentions. You finally see him at the official weigh-in held at the Fives Court 2 days before the fight. He's smaller than you expected, maybe 5'8" to your 6 feet, but built like a brick wall with a neck so thick it almost merges with his shoulders. His face is surprisingly unmarked for a veteran fighter, testament to his defensive skill. When you shake hands, his grip is crushing, his eyes cold and assessing. "Riley," he says simply, not hostile, but not friendly either. "Bennett," you reply, matching his tone. The conversation ends there, but something in that brief exchange leaves you unsettled. This isn't a man who fights for fame or even money, not primarily. This is someone who genuinely enjoys hurting people, who has found a socially acceptable outlet for darker impulses. The night before the fight, you lie awake in your room, mind racing despite exhaustion. The broken ribs throb with each heartbeat. Doubt creeps in like a fog. Jenkins, Allen, they were stepping stones. Bennett is a mountain. Ned finds you on the rooftop at dawn, watching the sun rise over London's chimney-crowded skyline. "Couldn't sleep?" he asks, though the answer is obvious from the shadows under your eyes. You shake your head. "Thinking too much." "Dangerous habit for a fighter," he says, settling beside you on the edge of the roof. "Thinking's for before and after. During, you just do." "What if I can't beat him, Ned?" The question has been burning inside you for weeks. He's never lost, never even been knocked down. Ned is quiet for a long moment, watching the pink-orange glow spread across the eastern sky. "No one's unbeatable, lad. No one. Bennett's just a man, bleeds like any other." "Not like any other," you argue. "You've seen him fight." "Aye, many times." Ned turns to face you fully. "Know what I see? A man who's never been truly tested, never had to fight through real adversity. Everything's come too easy for him." You're not convinced. Because he's that good. "Because he's that feared," Ned counters. Half his opponents were beaten before they stepped in the ring, already believing they couldn't win. He pokes you hard in the chest. "That can't be you today. You understand? Can't go in there already defeated." His words make sense, but the knot of fear in your stomach remains. You've never admitted it to anyone, but you've always been afraid before fights. The difference is that previously, hunger and desperation outweighed the fear. Now, with money in your pocket and a reputation to lose, the scales have tipped. The venue for the Bennett fight is the largest you've ever experienced, a converted theatre with seating for over 1,000 spectators. By noon, it's packed to capacity, with people still trying to buy their way in at the doors. The noise is overwhelming. Cheers, booze, betting calls, vendors selling everything from meat pies to souvenir programs. In your dressing room, actually a converted storage area behind the stage, Ned helps you prepare. The laudanum dulls the pain in your ribs to a manageable ache. The tight bandages restrict your breathing but provide crucial support. Your hands are wrapped with extra care, each finger individually before the full hand wrap. Holmes appears briefly, uncharacteristically tense. "Full house," he reports. "Every important sporting man in London is here, half the aristocracy too." He hesitates, then adds, "I've placed my bet on you. This surprises you. Despite the ribs, despite the odds?" A thin smile. "I didn't get where I am by following the crowd, Riley. Just make it count." When it's time, Ned leads you through a narrow corridor towards the roaring crowd. Just before you emerge, he grabs your shoulder, turning you to face him. "Remember what I said," he urges, voice fierce with conviction. "Bennett's never been tested. You have. Jenkins, Allen, they made you prove yourself. Bennett's had it easy. When things get hard today, and they will, he might just break. Then you're walking out into blinding gaslights and deafening noise." The ring looks smaller than usual, or maybe Bennett just makes it seem that way as he paces within the ropes, a caged predator eager for release. The referee calls you both to center ring for instructions. Up close, Bennett radiates controlled violence, his breathing steady, eyes locked on yours with unnerving intensity. "Clean fight," the referee instructs, though everyone knows the definition of clean is generous under London prize ring rules. No biting or eye gouging, but almost everything else goes. "Try to last 10 rounds, Bennett says quietly, his first words to you since the weigh-in. "Give these people their money's worth." Then the bell clangs, and hell begins. Bennett doesn't start cautiously like Allen or rely on one big punch like Jenkins. He comes at you like a force of nature, cutting off the ring with practiced footwork, throwing combinations to head and body that seem to have no end. It's immediately clear that everything Ned told you about his skill was, if anything, understated. You weather the first round through defensive instinct and desperate movement, but land nothing significant in return. Your corner is uncharacteristically quiet between rounds, Ned's expression grave as he wipes blood from a cut above your eye. "Need to slow him down," is all he says. "Body shots when he comes in." Easier said than done. Bennett's defense is nearly impenetrable, his head movement making your punches hit air more often than flesh. Meanwhile, his own shots land with disturbing frequency, each one delivered with perfect technique for maximum damage. By round 4, your ribs are screaming in pain, the laudanum's effects fading under the onslaught. A particularly vicious liver shot doubles you over, nearly ending the fight then and there. Only pride and stubbornness keep you upright. "He's breaking," Bennett comments to his corner loud enough for you to hear. "One more round." The words light a fire of defiance. You won't be talked about like a thing, a foregone conclusion. The next round, you abandon Ned's careful strategy and fight back with reckless aggression. Most of your punches miss or are blocked, but a looping overhand right catches Bennett by surprise, snapping his head back. For a brief moment, shock registers on his face. You've hurt him, not badly, but enough to make him reassess. The dynamic shifts subtly. Bennett becomes more cautious, showing you a respect that wasn't there before. The middle rounds become a brutal chess match. Bennett still controls most exchanges, but you find moments to counter, to make him pay for his aggression. Your ribs are definitely re-broken, possibly worse than before, but the pain has become abstract, something happening to someone else. In round 9, disaster strikes. An exchange near the ropes leaves you slightly off balance. Bennett seizes the opportunity, landing a perfect uppercut that seems to explode inside your skull. Your legs go completely, consciousness flickering like a candle in the wind. You're on the ground without memory of falling. The referee's count reaches 5 before the fog clears enough for you to realize what's happening. At 8, you force yourself to one knee. At 9, you're upright, barely, swaying like a drunk. Bennett comes in for the kill, unleashing a barrage that you survive only through muscle memory and desperation, covering up, clinching when possible, anything to buy seconds for your head to clear. The bell saves you. In your corner, Ned works frantically to bring you back, his voice urgent in your ear. "Still with me, lad? How many fingers?" He holds up 3. 3, you mumble. "Good enough. Listen, he thinks you're done. Everyone does, but he's tired too. Breathing hard. Look at his right side when he throws the left hook. He's dropping his elbow. Counter over the top." The next round is pure survival. Bennett presses his advantage, confident of an imminent victory. You retreat, block, clinch, anything to recover and wait for the opening Ned described. It comes late in the round. Bennett throws a left hook to the body, and there it is, the slight drop of his right elbow. You throw over the top, a desperate right hand with everything you have left. The punch lands flush on Bennett's jaw, a perfect shot. His eyes go blank, legs suddenly boneless. He pitches forward, face first onto the canvas. The crowd, which had been Bennett's, erupts in disbelief. The referee, seemingly in shock himself, begins the count. Bennett stirs at 5, tries to rise at 8, but can't coordinate his limbs. At 10, it's over. You've done the impossible. Knocked out the unbeatable William Bennett. Become, in that single moment, the King of London's prize ring. The aftermath is a blur, hands lifting you, voices congratulating you, Ned's face split by a grin so wide it must hurt. Holmes is there too, looking like a man who's just won the lottery, which, given his betting, he practically has. Through it all, the pain in your ribs, your hands, your battered face registers as a distant concern. Victory is the ultimate anesthetic. Only later, in the quiet of your room, does the full impact hit you. You're the champion now, the man to beat, the target for every hungry fighter looking to make their name, and you've never felt more broken, more in need of rest and healing. Lying in your bed, every breath a reminder of the damage done for this moment of glory. You wonder, what happens now? How many more times can your body endure this? How many more Bennett-level fighters can you survive? Questions for tomorrow. Tonight, despite the pain, despite the uncertainty, you drift towards sleep as London's champion. Unlike you now, comfortable in your modern bed with medical care just a phone call away, Victorian boxers often faced their greatest victories and most crushing defeats alone, in rented rooms with only rudimentary treatment for injuries that would require surgery and months of rehabilitation today. As sleep finally claims you, one thought surfaces through the pain and exhaustion. The higher you climb, the farther there is to fall. Fame hits like a tidal wave. One day you're Jack Riley, ambitious fighter. The next you're Champion Riley, your name on every sporting man's lips in London. They throw you a parade. Well, not a proper parade with bands and flags, but a procession of sorts. Holmes arranges for you to ride in an open carriage down the Strand, Ned beside you looking deeply uncomfortable in a borrowed suit. People line the streets, workers and gentlemen alike, cheering the new champion. "Smile, for God's sake," Holmes hisses from his seat opposite. "You look like you're attending a funeral." You try, but your face feels like one massive bruise. Your broken ribs stab with every breath, and the weight of what you've accomplished, what's expected of you now, sits heavy on your shoulders. Later, at a celebration dinner hosted by Holmes for his wealthy associates, you're the guest of honour, but feel like an exotic animal on display. Men in fine suits drink to your health while evaluating you like livestock, discussing your physical attributes as if you can't hear them. "Remarkable specimen," one red-faced banker comments. "The shoulders particularly, built for fighting these working-class types." "The question is longevity," another responds, swirling brandy in a crystal glass. "Bennett was considered unbeatable, but time catches all fighters." How long before someone younger takes Riley's place? 3 good years, a third speculates. Maybe 4 if he's careful, though careful rarely describes these fighting men. You want to tell them you're right there, that you can hear every word, but you stay silent, nodding politely, playing your role. The gap between your new status and your actual power has never felt wider. This social dynamic was a brutal reality for Victorian prize fighters. Even the most successful remained in many ways performing animals for the wealthy, appreciated for their physical prowess but rarely respected as equals. The class divide remained unbridgeable, fame notwithstanding. "Could I have a word?" A quiet voice at your elbow breaks your bitter reflections. You turn to find a gentleman in his 40s, distinguished-looking with a neatly trimmed beard. "George Reynolds," he introduces himself. "I document fights, writing a history of the prize ring." "A reporter?" you ask warily. "You've learned to be cautious around the press." "A historian," he corrects gently. "I'm interested in preserving the stories of fighters like yourself, your background, your journey, the real experiences, not just the public spectacle." Something in his manner seems genuine, lacking the usual condescension. You arrange to meet him the following week at a quiet tavern, away from Holmes and his circle. That night, returning to your new lodgings, a proper apartment now with actual furniture, you examine your battered face in a mirror. The victory over Bennett came at a steep price. Your right eye remains half closed, the cheekbone beneath possibly fractured. Your nose, broken at least twice before, has taken on a permanently flattened appearance. Your ears have begun to thicken from repeated trauma. At 24, you're already wearing the mask of your profession. You'll never be mistaken for anything but a fighter. Sleep comes hard, despite exhaustion. Your ribs ache, your hands throb, and your thoughts race with unwelcome clarity. This is the pinnacle, the achievement of everything you've worked for. Why does it feel so hollow? The next weeks bring a parade of obligations, exhibition matches where you perform for paying crowds, appearances at sporting clubs where gentlemen pay to shake your hand, meetings with potential sponsors offering money to associate their products with the champion. Holmes manages it all, taking his substantial cut. The money is good, better than you ever imagined possible growing up in poverty, but the constant demand for your presence, your performance, begins to wear on you. The line between Jack Riley the man and Champion Riley the commodity blurs dangerously. Meanwhile, your body struggles to heal. The broken ribs need proper rest, as do your chronically injured hands. But complete rest isn't an option, not with contracts to fulfill and appearances to make. You train lightly, just enough to maintain your image as the fighting champion, while silently counting the cost to your long-term health. Your meeting with Reynolds, the historian, provides unexpected relief. In a quiet corner of an unremarkable pub, far from the sporting crowd, he asks questions no one else has bothered with about your childhood, your first fights, your thoughts on the future of boxing. The Queensberry rules are gaining traction, he notes, referencing the new regulations mandating gloved fighting. What do you think? Will gloved boxing replace the traditional prize ring? You consider this honestly. Maybe, probably. Bare knuckles, it's brutal, makes for shorter careers. Like yours might be, he asks perceptively. The question catches you off guard. No one else has acknowledged the obvious, that despite your championship status, your body is already breaking down. Every fight takes something, you admit. Something you don't get back. Bennett took more than most. Reynolds nods, not with pity, but understanding. The public sees the glory. They don't see the aftermath. Neither did I, starting out, you confess. Thought I was indestructible. The historian smiles sadly. They all do. Tom Cribb, Tom Spring, Jem Ward. Every champion I've interviewed says the same. The human body isn't meant to absorb such punishment indefinitely. This was the cruel reality of Victorian boxing. Fighters often peaked in their mid-20s, their careers cut short by accumulated damage. Without modern medical care, injuries that today might be surgically repaired instead became permanent disabilities. Broken hands never properly healed. Damaged eyes gradually lost vision. Repeated concussions led to slurred speech, tremors, memory loss. What we now recognize as chronic traumatic encephalopathy or CTE. 2 months after the Bennett fight, when your ribs have healed enough for proper training, Ned sits you down for a serious conversation. Need to talk about what's next, he says, unusually solemn. Holmes wants to book a championship defense against Miller from Birmingham. He's good, you comment non-committally. He's more than good. He's younger, fresher, hasn't taken the damage you have. Ned looks uncomfortable. Listen, Jack, you've done what no one expected. Become champion from nothing. But every fighter has a clock running. Yours started ticking faster after Bennett. You've never heard Ned speak so directly about the limited lifespan of a fighting career. It's usually the unspoken truth hanging over every training session, every fight. You saying I should retire? As champion, the idea seems absurd. You're at your peak, financially, if not physically. Not saying that, just saying, be selective, pick the right fights, make the money while you can, but don't throw yourself to the wolves out of pride. He rubs his scarred knuckles, the joints swollen from his own fighting days. I've seen too many champions fight too long, end up punch-drunk and broke. His concern touches you. Despite his gruff exterior, Ned has become something between a father and an older brother. He's invested in your success, yes, but also in your survival. So, not Miller? Not Miller, he confirms. I'm thinking Cartwright. Decent name, decent skills, but styles make fights, and his style works for us. Holmes won't like it, less dramatic, but he'll accept it. This conversation highlights a crucial aspect of boxing few outside the sport fully understand: the careful matchmaking that goes into building and maintaining a champion's career. It wasn't about always facing the best, but about balancing risk and reward, navigating the treacherous waters between 2 easy fights that damage your credibility and 2 difficult ones that end your reign prematurely. Modern boxing fans often criticize champions for ducking tough opponents, but this strategic approach to matchmaking has always been part of the sport. In the Victorian era, with no sanctioning bodies or mandatory challengers, a champion had even more latitude to select opponents, though public opinion still mattered. Holmes isn't pleased when you and Ned present your preference for Cartwright over Miller, but he eventually relents. Fine, Cartwright has a following in the East End. We can sell it, but after him, Miller becomes unavoidable if you want to maintain your standing. The Cartwright fight is scheduled for 3 months out, standard preparation time for a championship bout. Your training camp starts with renewed purpose, your body having had time to partially recover from the Bennett battle. But halfway through camp during a sparring session, disaster strikes again. You slip a punch and pivot, a movement you've made thousands of times, but this time something gives way in your left knee with a sickening pop. The pain is immediate and incapacitating. Ligament, the doctor pronounces after examining the swollen joint. Torn or severely strained? Can it be fixed? You ask, already knowing the answer. The doctor's expression says it all. In 1847, joint injuries were poorly understood and largely untreatable. No surgery, no rehabilitation protocols, just rest and hope. It will stabilize somewhat with time, he offers. A month of complete rest, then gradually strengthen it. But it won't be the same. You'll need to adapt your fighting style. A month of rest means postponing the fight, something Holmes vigorously opposes when informed. Tickets are sold. Bets are placed. The sporting papers have been promoting this for weeks. It cannot be postponed. His tone leaves no room for negotiation. He can't put weight on the leg, Ned argues. How's he supposed to fight? Figure it out, Holmes replies coldly. That's what I pay you for. This callous attitude toward fighters' health wasn't unusual. Boxing was business, and business concerns trumped physical well-being. Modern boxing, with medical suspensions and rigorous pre-fight examinations, offers protections Victorian fighters could only dream of. In the weeks before the Cartwright fight, you and Ned work desperately to adapt. You develop a new stance that puts minimal weight on the injured leg. You practice fighting off the ropes, using them for support when the knee threatens to buckle. You drill counterpunching relentlessly, knowing you won't have the mobility to lead the action. It's not ideal, Ned admits after a particularly frustrating training session, but it might be enough. Cartwright's aggressive. He'll come to you. Make him pay when he does. The night of the fight, your knee is heavily wrapped beneath your trunks. Ned has also procured a stronger laudanum solution for the pain, riskier in terms of affecting your reflexes, but necessary if you're to have any chance. Cartwright is everything Ned described. Aggressive, powerful, but somewhat predictable. He charges from the opening bell, looking to overwhelm you with volume and pressure. Under normal circumstances, you'd circle away, establish your jab, control distance. But with your compromised mobility, you're forced to stand your ground, block what you can, and look for countering opportunities. It makes for a brutal, crowd-pleasing fight. Cartwright lands plenty, driving you to the ropes repeatedly, but each time he overcommits, you make him pay with short, sharp counters. By round 10, his face is a mess, though you're not unmarked yourself. The decisive moment comes in round 14. Cartwright, frustrated by his inability to finish you despite your obvious injury, lunges in carelessly. You sidestep, agonizing pain shooting through your knee, and catch him with a perfect right cross as he enters. His momentum combined with your punch creates devastating impact. He drops immediately, unconscious before he hits the canvas. The crowd explodes. The champion has defended his title in dramatic fashion, apparently overcoming adversity through heart and skill. Only you, Ned, and the doctor know the full extent of that adversity and the price paid to overcome it. In your dressing room afterward, as the doctor examines your now massively swollen knee, Holmes arrives with your purse and congratulations. "Oh, spectacular performance," he enthuses. "The sporting papers will love this. Champion overcomes injury to retain title. I can see the headlines now." You look up sharply. "Who said I was injured?" Holmes smiles thinly. "Please, the way you were standing, your limited movement." Any knowledgeable observer could tell, but it makes for a better story. The courageous champion fighting through pain. "Not a story," you mutter, wincing as the doctor probes your knee. "Not a bloody story at all. Everything's a story in this business, Riley." Holmes counts out your share of the purse. Substantial, but you're beginning to realize likely less than your true market value. Rest that leg. Miller awaits in the new year. After he leaves, the doctor delivers his verdict. The ligament is completely torn now. The joint is unstable. Fighting on it again? He shakes his head. Inadvisable. "How long for it to heal?" Ned asks. "Heal? It won't heal as such. The body can't repair a fully torn ligament. With complete rest, the swelling will subside, and he might regain some function. But another fight will likely cripple him permanently." The doctor's words hang heavy in the small room. "This isn't a broken rib or a cut that will mend with time. This is potentially career-ending. There must be something," you protest. "Some treatment." "There are surgeons experimenting with joint repairs," he concedes reluctantly, "in Paris and Vienna, but the procedures are experimental, expensive, and often unsuccessful, and certainly not available to—" He trails off, but his meaning is clear. Not available to someone of your social standing, despite your championship status. For the first time, you face the possibility that your fighting career might be over, not in some distant future, but now, at what should be your peak. The thought is terrifying. Fighting is all you know, all you've built your identity around. What happens, you ask Ned, when you're alone? To champions who can't fight anymore? Ned doesn't sugarcoat it. Depends. Some open pubs if they've saved enough. Some become trainers. Many drink away whatever they've earned, then fade away. The sport's not kind to its retired warriors. You think about Reynolds, the historian, and his comments about fighters' abbreviated careers. About the punch-drunk ex-champions he's interviewed, slurring their words as they recount past glories. Is that your future now? That night, lying in bed with your elevated leg throbbing despite the laudanum, you stare at the ceiling and calculate your finances. You've earned good money as champion, but you've also spent freely, enjoying the fruits of success without thought for tomorrow. How long would your savings last if you couldn't fight again? 6 months? A year? The fear that grips you isn't about fighting Miller or any other challenger. It's the primal fear of returning to poverty after having tasted prosperity, of losing not just your champion status, but your very livelihood. Unlike you now, cozy in your bed with career options and social safety nets, Victorian fighters had no retirement plans, no medical insurance, no disability benefits. When their bodies failed them, as all fighters' bodies eventually do, they faced a precarious future. As you drift toward uneasy sleep, one question haunts you. Is the glory of the prize ring worth the price you're paying? And if not, what choices remain? The next 6 weeks pass in a blur of pain, frustration, and mounting pressure. Your knee remains swollen, unstable, the simplest movements causing sharp stabs of agony. Walking requires a cane. Stairs are nearly impossible. Fighting seems an absurd fantasy. Yet Holmes visits weekly, bringing newspapers announcing your upcoming bout with Miller, speaking of training schedules and promotional appearances, as if your broken body is a minor inconvenience rather than a career-threatening reality. The betting's already heavy, he announces during one visit, seemingly oblivious to the ice pack on your knee. Miller's backers are confident, makes for favourable odds on our side. Did you hear what the doctor said? You ask, not bothering to hide your frustration. The knee won't hold. Another fight could cripple me permanently. Holmes waves this away like an annoying fly. Doctors always exaggerate. They're paid to be cautious. I've seen fighters overcome worse. Name one, Ned challenges from his corner of the room. Holmes hesitates, then shifts tactics. The public expects this fight, Riley. The champion faces all worthy challengers. That's the code of the prize ring. Withdraw now, and your reputation. He lets the threat hang unfinished. You both know what happens to champions who refuse fights. They're branded cowards, their accomplishments dismissed, their names tarnished in the sporting papers. After Holmes leaves, Ned sits heavily beside you. He's a vulture, he says bluntly, doesn't care if you're crippled as long as he gets his percentage. What choice do I have? The question isn't rhetorical. You genuinely need an answer. Ned scratches his stubbled chin thoughtfully. There's a fellow in the East End, not a proper doctor, more of a bone setter, works with injured dock workers, sometimes fighters, might be worth seeing. A quack? Or maybe, probably, but proper doctors haven't given you options, have they? He's right. Victorian medicine offered precious little for joint injuries. Surgery was primitive, dangerous, and rarely successful. Most doctors simply advised rest and accepted permanent disability as inevitable. The bone setter, Walter Tanner, operates from a small shop near the docks. The waiting room is crowded with labourers nursing various injuries, broken fingers, dislocated shoulders, crushed toes, the occupational hazards of London's working class. Tanner himself is a surprise. You expected some gnarled old man with mysterious potions. Instead, he's middle-aged, well-spoken, with the massive hands of someone used to manual labour. Former shipwright, he explains, noticing your assessment. Learned anatomy from books, technique from necessity. Dock workers can't afford proper doctors, so they come to me. His examination of your knee is thorough, almost scientific. He manipulates the joint carefully, noting your reactions, feeling for abnormalities beneath the skin. Cruciate ligament, he finally pronounces. Completely torn, supporting ligaments damaged too, joints unstable. Can you fix it? The desperate hope in your voice is embarrassing. Tanner sighs. Fix? No, nobody can truly fix this, but I might help you function better. His treatment is part manipulation, part massage, and entirely painful. He works the muscles around your knee, explaining as he goes. Can't repair the ligament, but can strengthen the surrounding muscles. They'll provide some stability the ligament used to give. He fashions a special bandage wrap, showing Ned how to apply it for maximum support. Wear this always. I'll see you 3 times weekly. We'll work on building those supporting muscles. As you leave, he adds a warning. This isn't a cure. It may help you walk normally, even run a bit. But fighting? He shakes his head. One wrong move, one bad twist, and you'll collapse. No strength in that joint anymore. Hope and despair wage war in your chest as you process his words. Walking normally again sounds miraculous after weeks of hobbling with a cane, but fighting, the only life you know, the source of your identity and income, remains a dangerous gamble. For the next month, you visit Tanner faithfully. The treatments are excruciating but effective. Gradually, your knee stabilizes enough to walk without the cane. Simple movement becomes possible without constant pain. You begin light training, shadow boxing, gentle bag work, nothing that puts real strain on the injured joint. Holmes watches these limited sessions with transparent impatience. Miller's camp is pushing, he reports. They're suggesting you're stalling, afraid to face him. The sporting papers are starting to question your courage. The accusation stings worse than the knee pain. In the code of the prize ring, courage ranks above all other virtues. To be labelled a coward is a fighter's ultimate disgrace. Your frustration boils over during one particularly heated exchange. Bring Miller here, you challenge Holmes. Let him see the knee. Let him understand what he'd be fighting. A one-legged champion. Showing weakness to a challenger, Holmes looks genuinely scandalized. Absolutely not. The very suggestion proves you don't understand this business. The business of getting crippled for other men's entertainment and profit. I understand it perfectly. The words hang in the air between you, a truth rarely spoken aloud in boxing circles. Holmes's expression hardens. You have a contract, Riley. The Miller fight happens with or without your cooperation. Break that contract and I'll ensure you never fight in London again. After he storms out, Ned gives a low whistle. Well, that bridge is thoroughly burned. Good, you say, though your stomach churns with anxiety. Holmes has connections throughout the London sporting world. His enmity could be professionally devastating. That evening, an unexpected visitor arrives at your lodgings. Reynolds, the boxing historian. He brings a bottle of decent whiskey and sympathetic ears. I heard about the knee, he says, pouring generous measures for you both. And the situation with Holmes. Word travels fast in fighting circles. You accept the drink gratefully. Holmes wants me to fight Miller. Knee be damned. Reynolds nods thoughtfully. The eternal dilemma of the prize fighter. Risk permanent injury for temporary glory, or preserve your body at the cost of your reputation. You've studied boxing history, you say, swirling the amber liquid in your glass. What happens to champions who walk away, who choose health over honour? They're forgotten, Reynolds answers honestly. Or worse, remembered as cowards. The prize ring has never valued self-preservation. It's a young man's game with old man's consequences. He reaches into his satchel, producing a small leather-bound book. I've been documenting the aftermath of fighting careers. What becomes of champions when the roaring crowd fades? The book contains interviews with former champions and contenders, men who once commanded London's attention now reduced to shadows of their former selves. Some found modest success as publicans or boxing trainers. Many ended in poverty and obscurity. A few succumbed to alcoholism, unable to replace the thrill of fighting or manage the pain of accumulated injuries. Most disturbing are Reynolds' descriptions of neurological damage. Punch-drunk, fighters called it. Men in their 30s with trembling hands and slurred speech, their memories fragmenting, personalities changing, tempers flaring unpredictably. The public sees only the glory, Reynolds says softly. They never witness the aftermath. 20 years from now, when you're struggling to button your shirt with gnarled hands or trying to remember your own address, they'll be celebrating some new young champion. His words paint a bleak but realistic picture. This is what awaited most Victorian fighters, a future of physical decay, financial insecurity, and fading relevance. There were exceptions, fighters who transitioned successfully to other careers or saved enough to live comfortably. But they were the minority. What would you do, you ask him, if you were me with this knee and Holmes breathing down your neck? Reynolds considers the question seriously. I'm not a fighter, never faced your choices, but I've interviewed dozens who have. He sips his whiskey. The smartest ones recognized when to step away, usually after their first serious injury. They found other paths while their names still carried weight, used their fame to open doors before it faded. The next day, still mulling Reynolds' words, you receive an unexpected invitation. Tom Sayers, one of the most renowned champions in British boxing history, now retired, requests your company at his public house, The Wrestler. Sayers had been one of your boyhood idols. His 1860 fight against American John Carmel Heenan was the stuff of boxing legend. 37 brutal rounds ending only when spectators stormed the ring. That he's reached out personally is both thrilling and intimidating. The Wrestler is a respectable establishment in a decent neighbourhood, evidence of Sayers' successful transition from fighter to businessman. The man himself greets you warmly, his handshake firm despite visibly swollen knuckles. At 39, he's aged prematurely, his face mapped with scar tissue, but he carries himself with the quiet dignity of a man at peace with his choices. Heard about your situation, he says, after ordering ales for you both. Knee injuries are the devil. Had one myself near the end. How did you know when to stop, you ask, the question that's been haunting you for weeks. Sayers smiles ruefully. My body told me, loudly. After Heenan, I was never the same. Could have fought on, probably won a few more, but to what end? More damage? More pain? I'd proven everything I needed to prove. He gestures around the pub. This place was my exit strategy. Started planning it 2 years before I actually retired. Used my name while it still meant something. Holmes would destroy my reputation if I withdrew from Miller, you confess. Sayers nods, understanding. Men like Holmes see fighters as racehorses, valuable only while winning, disposable after. You need to see yourself differently. He studies you thoughtfully. You're educated, articulate, unusual for a fighter. Ever considered writing about the sport? The papers always need knowledgeable boxing correspondents. The suggestion catches you by surprise. You can read and write passably, better than many in your social class, but you've never considered turning these skills into livelihood. There are other paths, Sayers continues. Exhibition sparring for gentlemen's clubs, lighter, demonstrative, easier on the body, training rich men's sons in the noble art, even theatrical performances of famous fights. The fighting life doesn't have to end with fighting. His words plant seeds that take root in your mind. For the first time, you begin to envision a future beyond the prize ring, one that doesn't end in poverty or physical ruin. The next morning brings another confrontation with Holmes, who arrives unannounced at your training session. He watches with visible disappointment as you carefully shadowbox the heavy knee bandage obvious beneath your trunks. This is the champion of London, he says scathingly. Moving like an old man. Miller will destroy you in this condition. Then postpone the fight, Ned suggests. Not for the first time. Give the knee proper time to heal. Impossible. Contract signed, venue booked, bets placed. Holmes fixes you with a cold stare. The fight happens in 3 weeks, Riley. Be ready or forfeit your title in disgrace. After he leaves, Ned explodes. Heartless bastard, he knows you can't properly train. Knows you'll be half crippled in there. Maybe that's the point, you say quietly, as realization dawns. Maybe he's betting against me. The thought is so obvious once articulated. Holmes has always been a gambler first, manager second. What better opportunity than a champion forced to fight while seriously injured? The odds would be magnificent. This scenario wasn't uncommon in Victorian boxing, where gambling often influenced matchmaking more than sporting merit. Fighters were pieces on a chessboard, moved according to betting strategies rather than their well-being. We need to be sure, Ned says, thinking aloud. If he's betting against you, that changes everything legally. Breach of contract, conflict of interest. Through discreet inquiries in London's betting establishments, you confirm your suspicion. Holmes has indeed placed substantial wagers on Miller, not directly, but through associates. He stands to make far more from your defeat than your victory. Armed with this knowledge, you arrange to meet him at his club, a gentleman's establishment where he conducts business. His surprise at seeing you there quickly turns to wariness. "Come to discuss final arrangements for Miller?" he asks, gesturing for you to sit. "Come to discuss your bets against me," you counter, remaining standing. "Interesting strategy for a manager, guaranteed profits either way." His expression doesn't change, but a muscle twitches in his jaw. "I diversify my interests, as any sensible businessman would. You set me up to lose," you continue, anger warming your blood. "An injured champion against a prime challenger. The odds must be very favourable." "This conversation is beneath my dignity," Holmes says, standing. "The fight contract is binding. Withdraw if you wish, but the consequences will include exposure of your betting practices," you interrupt. "I wonder how your gentleman friends would react to learning how you manage fighters, how sporting authorities might view such conflicts of interest." It's a bluff, partly. Victorian boxing operated in a legal grey area, with few formal regulations, but reputation mattered enormously in these circles. Scandal could destroy a man like Holmes, whose position depended on the respect of his peers. His expression hardens. "What exactly do you want, Riley?" "Release from the Miller contract, a fair settlement for past victories, and public acknowledgement that I'm relinquishing the title due to injury, not cowardice." The negotiation is tense but productive. Holmes, recognizing the potential damage to his reputation, eventually agrees to your terms. The settlement isn't generous, but it's enough to provide breathing room while you consider your next steps. The sporting papers announce your retirement with surprising sympathy, the story of your knee injury generating more understanding than expected. Your reputation remains largely intact, not as a coward who fled challenges, but as a champion who conquered the best before being betrayed by his body. That evening, as you sit with Ned in a quiet corner of the Fighting Cock, the reality of your decision finally sinks in. You're no longer Champion Riley, just Jack Riley, former boxer, uncertain future stretching before you. "What now?" Ned asks, nursing his ale. "Say as suggested writing for the sporting papers, or exhibition matches." You rotate your glass slowly. "Reynolds thinks I could help with his boxing history book." Ned nods approval. "Good options, better than ending up punch-drunk with nothing to show for it." "And you?" you ask. The question has been weighing on you. Ned's livelihood was tied to your fighting career. "Got other fighters," he says with a shrug. "Not as good as you, mind, but they pay the bills." And he hesitates, uncharacteristically bashful. "Been talking to the owner here about buying in. Might become a publican myself one day." The revelation brings a smile to your face. The Fighting Cock with Ned Clark as landlord, perfect. As the evening progresses, your spirits gradually lift. The end of your fighting career isn't the catastrophe it initially seemed. Options exist, paths forward. The fame you've earned while fleeting opens doors that would otherwise remain closed to someone of your background. Later, walking home through London's gaslit streets, your knee aching dully with each step, you find yourself at peace with your choice. The fighting life gave you everything, lifted you from poverty, brought fame and fortune, tested your courage and resolve. That it couldn't last forever doesn't diminish what you accomplished. Unlike you now, comfortable in your bed with retirement plans and social security awaiting your later years, Victorian fighters had to create their own second acts, often with broken bodies and limited education. That so many failed makes the successes all the more remarkable. As you climb the stairs to your lodgings, leaning heavily on the banister to spare your knee, you silently thank that joint for failing when it did, before you took damage from which there was no recovery. Some champions weren't so fortunate, fighting on until their minds and bodies were permanently ruined. Tomorrow brings uncertainty, but also possibility. You're young enough to start again, experienced enough to avoid the worst pitfalls, and still carrying the prestige of former champion, a title no one can take away, even as your fighting days recede into memory. Life after fighting begins with a peculiar emptiness. No training schedule dictating your days, no upcoming opponent to analyze, no crowds chanting your name, just quiet mornings and the persistent ache of old injuries to remind you of what was. The first few weeks of retirement, you barely leave your lodgings. A heavy melancholy settles over you, heavier than any opponent you've faced. Your identity has been fighter for so long that its absence leaves a void you don't know how to fill. "This ain't healthy," Ned declares, showing up unannounced one drizzly afternoon. "Sitting here like a widow. Need to get you out." He practically drags you to the Fighting Cock, where several familiar faces from the boxing world greet you with genuine warmth. Former opponents, sparring partners, even Jenkins from Bristol, now retired himself after too many losses. "The champion," Jenkins calls out, raising his glass. Or should I say, the writer? News travels fast. You've accepted Reynolds' offer to contribute to his boxing history book, providing first-hand accounts of fights and training methods. It's not steady employment, but it's something, a toe in the door of a different world. "Not a champion anymore," you remind him, uncomfortable with the title. "Once a champion, always a champion," Jenkins insists. "Belt or no belt, unless someone beats you in the ring, which they didn't, you're still champion in my book." His generous perspective helps ease something in your chest. You hadn't realized how much the perceived shame of retirement weighed on you until someone lifted it. Reynolds proves to be an excellent collaborator. Twice weekly, you meet at his modest home in Bloomsbury, where you dictate your boxing experiences while he transcribes and shapes them into chapters. Your formal education might be limited, but years in the fighting world have given you insights few scholars possess. "The stance is everything," you explain during one session. "Modern fighters don't understand. Bare knuckles, you need to protect your hands as much as your face. Break your hand in round 3, you're fighting one-handed for 40 more rounds." "Show me," Reynolds requests, and you demonstrate the traditional bare-knuckle stance, left arm extended, right tucked close to the body, weight balanced to allow quick movement or wrestling. These sessions become the highlight of your week. Reynolds treats you as an expert, not a curiosity or a broken-down fighter. He values your knowledge, respects your experiences. For someone accustomed to being valued primarily for physical prowess, this intellectual recognition is both novel and deeply satisfying. The financial aspect of post-fighting life proves more challenging. Your settlement from Holmes provided a cushion, but not an indefinite one. The payments from Reynolds help, but aren't substantial. Exhibition matches offer better money, but you're reluctant to risk your damaged knee. Opportunity arrives from an unexpected quarter. Lord Queensberry, who you met briefly during your championship days, requests a meeting at his London club. His interest in reforming boxing into a scientific sport with standardised rules has only grown since your last encounter. "Mr. Riley," he greets you warmly. "Thank you for coming. I've been following your situation with interest." The club is luxurious beyond anything you've experienced. Thick carpets, polished wood, deferential servants. You feel conspicuously out of place despite your carefully chosen attire. I'm establishing a boxing academy, Queensberry explains, where gentlemen can learn the noble art in a controlled scientific manner. With gloves, naturally, and proper instruction, I need someone who understands both the traditional methods and the necessity for evolution. You want me to teach boxing to gentlemen? The concept seems absurd. You, a former footman from the working class, instructing aristocrats. Precisely. Queensberry sips his brandy. Your name carries weight. Your experience is unquestionable, and you understand that bare-knuckle fighting's days are numbered. The sport must evolve or die. The offer is substantial, a regular salary to demonstrate techniques, oversee training, and occasionally spar lightly with advanced students. The work would be far less damaging than actual fighting, with the stability you've never known. Why me, you ask bluntly? Plenty of former champions looking for work, ones without bad knees. Queensberry smiles slightly. Because you chose to retire rather than fight injured, it shows intelligence, foresight, qualities I value above mere toughness, and frankly, your articulate manner will make you more acceptable to my colleagues than most from the prize ring. This last part stings slightly, the implication that you're somehow better than other fighters, more suitable for genteel company because you can speak without too much working-class roughness, but the opportunity is too good to refuse based on pride alone. This situation perfectly captures the complex social dynamics of Victorian England. Boxing began crossing class boundaries, with aristocrats increasingly interested in the sport, but only if it could be civilized according to their standards. Former fighters who could bridge these worlds became valuable cultural translators. The Queensberry Academy opens 3 months later in an elegant building near St James's Park. Your role combines practical instruction and cultural education, teaching not just punching technique but the history and ethos of boxing to men who've never known physical hardship. The work is surprisingly satisfying. Your students range from soft university boys to military officers seeking to improve their combat skills. Most begin awkwardly, throwing punches that would get them instantly knocked out in a real fight, but some show genuine aptitude, and watching their progress becomes a source of unexpected pride. No, Lord Harrington, you correct one young nobleman whose defensive posture leaves his midsection completely exposed. In a real fight, you'd be spitting blood by now. Elbow tighter to the body, like this, you demonstrate, and he adjusts, nodding seriously. Like when you fought Bennett. I read about that counter you landed in round 19. The mention catches you off guard. You followed my fights? Everyone did, he says, seeming surprised by your surprise. I had a wager on you against Alan, paid for a rather splendid dinner at my club. This happens frequently, discovering that your fighting career made deeper impressions than you realized. These gentlemen might view boxing through a different lens than the working-class crowds at the Fighting Cock, but their admiration appears genuine. Physically, retirement brings mixed changes. Without the constant punishment of training and fighting, some injuries begin to properly heal for the first time. The perpetual split knuckles close up, the bruising around your eyes fades. You sleep better, wake with less pain. But other damage proves permanent. Your knee never fully recovers, leaving you with a slight limp that worsens in cold weather. Your once straight nose remains permanently flattened. Your left ear, repeatedly damaged by punches, stays thickened and slightly cauliflowered. These marks of your former profession will accompany you for life. Most concerning are the occasional headaches, momentary confusions, and unpredictable mood shifts, subtle signs of the brain trauma that was an inevitable consequence of your career. Nothing severe enough to impair daily function, but reminders that your body paid prices not immediately visible. All fighters get 'em, Ned reassures you when you mention these symptoms during one of your regular meetings at the Fighting Cock. Memory goes a bit fuzzy, temper flares up for no reason, part of the game. Will it get worse? The question has been haunting you since retirement. Ned's hesitation before answering tells you everything. Sometimes, depends on how many hard hits you took, how many times you fought concussed. This was the cruel legacy of Victorian boxing, neurological damage that would now be diagnosed as chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, but was then simply accepted as the fighter's lot. Without modern understanding of concussions or brain injury, fighters and their handlers viewed these symptoms as an unavoidable occupational hazard. Your role at the Academy gradually expands beyond teaching. Queensberry, noting your articulate manner and practical knowledge, invites you to contribute to the development of his new boxing rules. These Queensberry rules will mandate gloves, timed rounds, and prohibit wrestling, transforming prize fighting into something closer to modern boxing. The old ways are dying, Queensberry declares during one meeting. Bare knuckles, fights lasting 50 rounds, men beaten until permanently disfigured. The public's appetite for such barbarism is waning. Boxing must adapt or be outlawed entirely. With respect, my lord, you counter, gloves won't necessarily make boxing safer, might even make it more dangerous in some ways. He looks surprised. How so? Surely padding reduces injury. To the face, yes, and especially to the hands. But with protected hands, men will throw more head punches. In bare knuckles, you aim for the body because you'll break your hands on the skull. With gloves, it'll be headshots all day. This observation proves prophetic, as gloved boxing gradually replaces bare-knuckle fighting in the coming decades. Brain injuries actually increase, though hand injuries and facial lacerations decrease. The padded glove enables fighters to target the head repeatedly without breaking their hands, creating different but equally serious medical consequences. This insight is one of many you contribute to Queensberry's project. Your perspective as someone who's actually fought, felt punches land, made split-second tactical decisions in the ring, provides practical balance to his theoretical approach. Your association with Queensberry opens other doors. You're invited to write a regular column for the Sporting Times, commenting on current fights and sharing stories from your career. The column proves unexpectedly popular, your straightforward prose and insider knowledge attracting readers beyond the usual boxing enthusiasts. One evening, after a particularly successful demonstration at the Academy, Queensberry introduces you to William Gladstone, the former Prime Minister himself. The elderly statesman admits to following your fighting career with interest. Quite remarkable, Gladstone comments, your transition from the prize ring to more cerebral pursuits, a testament to the possibilities for self-improvement in our modern age. His comment, though well-intentioned, underscores the class prejudice that still shapes your world, the assumption that physical prowess and intelligence are somehow mutually exclusive, that a fighter becoming a writer represents an extraordinary transformation, rather than the expression of abilities that always existed. Rather than take offence, you simply nod. Fighting taught me more than most realise, sir. Strategy, patience, reading opponents, not so different from politics, I'd imagine. Gladstone laughs, genuinely amused. Touché, Mr. Riley, though in Parliament we generally refrain from actual punches, however tempting. These interactions with society's upper echelons, unimaginable during your footman days, become increasingly common as your new career progresses. You move between worlds, never fully belonging to either, too educated and refined now for complete comfort among your working-class origins, too marked by your fighting past for true acceptance in genteel society. This liminal position grants you a unique perspective. From your vantage point straddling Victorian class divisions, you observe the hypocrisies and contradictions of both worlds. The aristocrats who decry the brutality of bare-knuckle fighting while sending young men to die in colonial wars. The working-class fighters who scorn the softness of gloved boxing while their bodies break down before they reach 40. Life settles into a comfortable routine, mornings at the academy, afternoons writing your column or working with Reynolds, evenings occasionally spent at the Fighting Cock, where you're still welcomed as one of their own despite your changed circumstances. Your financial situation stabilizes, not wealthy by any means, but secure in a way few retired fighters ever achieve. You move to better lodgings in a respectable neighborhood, wear good clothes, eat well. The desperate poverty of your early years feels increasingly distant. 1 year after your retirement, Miller, who would have been your next opponent, fights for the vacant championship against a young challenger named Cooper. You attend as a correspondent for the Sporting Times, your first time watching a major fight rather than participating. The experience proves surprisingly emotional, entering the venue without the crushing pressure of performance, observing the nervous energy of the fighters, recognizing their pre-fight rituals, their carefully masked fear, hearing the crowd roar for blood, the same crowd that once roared for yours. "Strange, isn't it?" says a voice beside you. Tom Sayers, the former champion who advised your retirement, has joined you in the press section, watching instead of doing. "Like watching someone else eat your dinner," you agree. Sayers laughs. "Perfect description. Miss it sometimes?" You consider the question honestly. The winning, the respect, even the training sometimes, but the pain, the fear, waking up the next day feeling half dead? You shake your head. No, don't miss those parts at all. The fight itself is brutal but technical. Miller proves the better man, wearing Cooper down over 37 punishing rounds before the younger man can't continue. Watching clinically, you note that your chances against Miller would have been poor, especially with your injured knee. The decision to retire was the right one. After filing your column, a detailed analysis that both praises Miller's technique and notes vulnerabilities future opponents might exploit, you find yourself lingering in the empty venue. The crowds have departed, the fighters gone to celebrate or lick their wounds. Only workers remain, cleaning blood and spit from the boards, dismantling the ring. There's a strange peace in this moment, a closing of a circle. You began as a desperate young man seeking any path out of poverty. You climbed to heights few achieve, experienced glory and suffering in equal measure, and now you've found a new path, one that honors your fighting past while preserving your future. Walking home through London's gaslit streets, your knee aching dully with the coming rain, you reflect on the journey. The prize ring gave and took in equal measure, gave opportunity, fame, financial stability, took health, years of your life, countless drops of blood. Was it worth it? The question has no simple answer. Without boxing, you'd likely still be a footman, or worse, unemployed, hungry, anonymous. The fighting life, for all its brutality, offered escape from the equally brutal trap of Victorian poverty. Unlike you now, warm and comfortable in your modern bed with options your ancestors couldn't imagine, Victorian working-class men had precious few paths to advancement. The prize ring, with all its dangers, represented a rare meritocracy where skill and courage could trump birth and privilege. As you reach your lodgings, fumbling with the key in the dark, you realise that the question of worth may be the wrong one entirely. Your fighting career wasn't a simple transaction to be judged by its final balance. It was lived experience, painful, glorious, terrible, exhilarating, that shaped you into the man you've become, and perhaps that's enough. 10 years pass like a series of rounds, each with its triumphs and setbacks, its moments of clarity and confusion. London transforms around you, new buildings rising, railways expanding, Queen Victoria's empire reaching its zenith, and you transform too in quieter ways. Your name remains known in sporting circles, though increasingly as a writer and historian rather than a fighter. Your column in the Sporting Times has run without interruption, chronicling boxing's evolution from bare-knuckle combat to the gloved, regulated sport gaining popularity under the Queensberry rules. The Academy prospers, attracting students from across Britain and even Europe. Your position has evolved from instructor to director, overseeing a staff of teachers while personally handling only advanced students. The work provides stability few former fighters ever know. Reynolds' book, The Noble Art, A History of Prize Fighting, with your extensive contributions, sells remarkably well and establishes both of you as authorities on boxing's past. This leads to lecture invitations, consulting roles for theatrical productions about famous fights, even occasional meetings with politicians interested in the sport's regulation. One cool autumn evening in 1857, you're walking home from the academy when familiar pain shoots through your knee, sharper than usual. You pause, leaning against a lamppost, waiting for it to subside. "Need a hand, old man?" a voice from behind, teasing but concerned. You turn to find Miller, your once would-be opponent, now retired himself after 5 successful title defences. Your relationship has evolved from potential rivals to something resembling friendship. The what-if of your cancelled fight long faded into irrelevance. "Old injury acting up," you explain unnecessarily. Miller knows all about old injuries. His right hand, repeatedly broken during his championship reign, is permanently disfigured, the knuckles fused at unnatural angles. "Weather's turning," he observes, "always worse in the damp." You nod, resuming your walk together. "How's the pub business?" Miller purchased the Champion's Rest 2 years ago, following the well-worn path of successful fighters transitioning to publicans. "Profitable enough, better than taking punches for a living." This casual encounter exemplifies how the boxing fraternity functions in Victorian London. Despite fierce competition in the ring, fighters often develop bonds based on shared experiences no outsider can truly understand. The physical toll, the public scrutiny, the brief glory and long aftermath. These create a brotherhood that transcends rivalries. "Heading there now, actually," Miller continues. "Few of the old crowd gathering. Care to join?" You hesitate only briefly before accepting. Though you've built a respectable life in more genteel circles, there's a comfort in the company of fighters that can't be replicated elsewhere. People who understand the cost of your achievements without needing explanations. The Champion's Rest buzzes with activity when you arrive, a mix of current fighters, retired veterans, trainers and enthusiasts. You recognise most faces, though some of the younger fighters know you only by reputation. You're part of their history now, a link to the bare-knuckle era rapidly fading into memory. Riley Ned Clark, your former trainer, waves you over to a corner table. Now in his 60s, age has bent but not broken him. He walks with a cane, his fight-damaged hands noticeably trembling, but his mind remains sharp as ever. "How's the fighting cock treating you, you ask?" Settling into a chair, Ned finally purchased part ownership in your old haunt 3 years ago, fulfilling his long-held ambition. "Can't complain. Good business when there's a big fight on." He lowers his voice conspiratorially. "Still host bare-knuckle matches in the back room sometimes, for the purists. This doesn't surprise you. Despite the Queensberry rules' official adoption, underground bare-knuckle fights continue throughout London, a shadow sport existing alongside its more respectable offspring. Some fighters and fans simply refuse to accept the new, softer version of boxing. The gathering turns into an impromptu reunion of your era's champions and contenders. Jenkins from Bristol, now significantly heavier, but still instantly recognisable by his twice-broken nose. Thompson from Liverpool, who once challenged for your title, but now runs a successful boxing gymnasium. Even old Bennett, your greatest opponent, makes an appearance, leaner than in his fighting days, walking with a pronounced limp from hip damage sustained in his later bouts. "The last of the bare-knuckle champions," Miller declares, raising a toast to the assembled fighters. "Proper fighting, that was. None of this dancing around with pillows on your hands." The sentiment draws appreciative laughter, but you notice something beneath the nostalgia. Many of these men, like you, bear permanent marks of their fighting days. Slurred speech from too many head blows, trembling hands, difficulty remembering names or recent events, bodies aged far beyond their years. As the evening progresses, conversation turns to boxing's future. The Queensberry rules have been officially adopted by most sporting organisations, bare-knuckle fighting increasingly pushed to the margins. Matches now have strict limits, 15 3-minute rounds at most, a far cry from the epic battles of your era that could stretch beyond 60 rounds. "Too soft now," Bennett complains. "In our day, you had to have heart, had to push through pain. Now, referee stops it if someone gets a bloody nose. Maybe that's not entirely bad," you suggest carefully. "How many of us can walk properly anymore? How many can use our hands without pain?" A momentary silence falls over the table. These are truths rarely acknowledged aloud in fighting circles, where toughness remains the cardinal virtue. The long-term consequences of prize fighting, physical deterioration, neurological damage, shortened lives, tricks. "Worth it, though," Jenkins says finally. "For what we experienced, for what we accomplished, would any of you truly choose differently?" The question hangs in the smoky air. Would you? If somehow transported back to that moment when Tom Cribb discovered you fighting in a country pub, knowing everything that would follow, the glory and the pain, the triumphs and sacrifices, would you choose another path? Before you can answer, a commotion near the door draws everyone's attention. A young fighter has arrived, his recent victory evident in the fresh cuts and swelling of his face. The crowd parts for him, offers congratulations, buys drinks. He moves with the cocky confidence of youth and success, not yet understanding how fleeting both can be. "Reminds me of you," Ned comments quietly. "When you first came to London, same fire in his eyes." You watch the young man, seeing both your past and his future, the identical cycle preparing to repeat itself. Glory, pain, decline, adaptation, the eternal pattern of the fighting life. Later that night, walking home through London's foggy streets, you reflect on Jenkins's question. Was it worth it? The answer remains complex, a calculation with too many variables to resolve neatly. Boxing gave you a life beyond your origins, lifted you from poverty to relative comfort. It granted experiences few men of your background could dream of: fame, achievement, even a degree of respect from society's highest echelons. But it also took pieces of you that can never be restored. The knee that aches constantly, the headaches that come without warning, the occasional confusion when words suddenly elude you mid-sentence. The fog thickens as you near your lodgings, transforming familiar streets into mysterious passages. London in fog becomes another world entirely. Sounds muffled, distances distorted, ordinary landmarks rendered strange and new. Rather like memory itself, you think, the past simultaneously vivid and obscured, certain moments preserved in perfect clarity, while others fade into shapeless mist. Your fighting days increasingly take on this quality: specific punches, rounds, victories recalled with photographic precision, while entire fights blur together into a general impression of pain and exhilaration. The years continue their steady march. Boxing evolves further from its bare-knuckle origins, becoming more regulated, more scientific, increasingly international. You document these changes in your writing, your perspective uniquely valuable as someone who straddles both eras. In 1867, the Queensberry Rules are officially published, marking the formal end of the bare-knuckle period. Though underground matches continue, legitimate boxing now means gloved fighting with timed rounds, scoring systems, and medical oversight. The transition you witnessed firsthand is complete. Your personal life finds unexpected happiness when you marry at 40, late by Victorian standards, but typical for someone whose earlier years were consumed by fighting. Elizabeth, a widow 10 years your junior, brings companionship and stability previously unknown. With her 2 children from her first marriage, you experience a family life that once seemed impossible. "Never thought I'd see the great champion Riley playing nursemaid," Ned teases, when visiting your home and finding you patiently teaching your 7-year-old stepson the rudiments of safe boxing. "Teaching discipline, not fighting," you correct, though you can't help smiling at the domestic tableau you present, a far cry from the blood-soaked champion of the London prize ring. Physical decline accelerates with age, as it does for all fighters. By 50, the knee that ended your career barely supports weight on bad days. Your hands, damaged by countless impacts against bone and flesh, develop arthritis that makes writing increasingly difficult. Memory issues become more pronounced. Names escape you. Appointments slip away unless written down. Recent conversations evaporate while fights from decades ago remain crystal clear. You're not alone in this decline. One by one, your contemporaries from the fighting world succumb to similar fates, often accelerated by alcohol or financial hardship. Some die shockingly young. Bennett at 43 from what doctors call apoplexy, but you recognize as the cumulative effect of too many head blows. Jenkins, cheerful until the end, from lung disease at 47. Others linger in diminished states, shadows of their former selves. Tom Sayers, whose advice helped you transition successfully from fighting, passes in 1865 at just 39. His funeral procession draws thousands, a testament to what he represented in British culture. You attend as both journalist and mourner, writing a tribute that captures not just his fighting prowess, but his intelligence in knowing when to step away. Sayers understood what many fighters never grasp. You write that champions are remembered for how they exit the ring as much as for what they accomplish within it. His greatest victory was choosing life beyond fighting while still able to enjoy it. In 1889, you witnessed the last great bare-knuckle championship bout. John L. Sullivan against Jake Kilrain fought under London prize ring rules despite taking place in America. The fight lasts an astonishing 75 rounds in blistering Mississippi heat, a final epic of the style that made you champion. Reporting on it for the Sporting Times produces one of your most celebrated columns, contrasting this throwback to your era with modern gloved boxing. Sullivan and Kilrain fought as we once did, with naked fists, unlimited rounds, and only exhaustion or inability to continue as the end point. Modern observers accustomed to Queensberry contests may find such combat barbaric, but there was a purity to it that gloved boxing, for all its scientific advancements, cannot replicate. When knuckle meets flesh without padding, truth is immediately established between two men. There is no hiding, no tactical delay, only the essential question of fighting. Who possesses greater skill, heart, and capacity to endure? As the Victorian era draws toward its close, you become something of a living relic, one of the last active links to boxing's bare-knuckle past. Younger writers and historians seek your recollections. Theatrical productions about the prize ring consult you for authenticity. Your own book Champion's Journey from Footman to Prize Ring, published in your 60th year, becomes the definitive insider's account of that vanished world. You've preserved something important, Reynolds tells you at your book launch celebration. When the last of your generation is gone, your words will remain to tell future generations what it was truly like. The thought brings unexpected comfort. Perhaps this is your real legacy, not the long-faded championships or the newspaper columns, but this act of bearing witness to a world that existed briefly and intensely before transforming into something different. In quieter moments, you sometimes wonder what became of those who fought alongside and against you, not the champions and famous contenders whose fates you've tracked, but the countless others who stepped into makeshift rings for a few pounds, risking everything with no lasting recognition. The dockworkers and butchers and labourers who fought from desperation, then disappeared back into anonymity when their bodies failed. For every fighter who achieved what you did, championship, financial security, successful transition to a second career, dozens ended broken, impoverished, forgotten. This is boxing's eternal math, its brutal calculus unchanged from your day to the present. For each success story, many failures. For each clever escape, many trapped by circumstance or injury. On your 70th birthday, an age few professional fighters of your era reached, your family organises a celebration that brings together the remaining threads of your varied life. Former students from the academy, now middle-aged men with their own accomplishments. Colleagues from your writing career, the dwindling number of fighters from your competitive days. Even Lord Queensberry himself, elderly but still passionate about the sport's continued evolution. To Jack Riley, Ned offers the first toast, his voice frailer but spirit undimmed. Footman, fighter, champion, writer, teacher, but most importantly, survivor. The word resonates deeply. Survivor. Of all the titles you've held, perhaps this is the most meaningful. You survived not just individual fights, but the fighting life itself navigated its treacherous currents to reach this peaceful shore. Looking around at the gathered faces, some from the highest reaches of society, others from its humblest corners, you reflect on boxing's strange ability to transcend Victorian class boundaries. For all its brutality, the prize ring created spaces where birth mattered less than courage, where a footman could rise to prominence through skill and determination alone. The celebration continues well into the evening, stories flowing as freely as wine. You contribute few words, content to observe this intersection of your various lives. The physical toll of your fighting years is evident. You tire more easily now. Words sometimes elude you. Remains intact. Later, as you prepare for bed in the comfortable home that fighting ultimately provided, your mind drifts back to that scared young footman who first stepped into a makeshift ring, desperate for a way out of poverty. How astonished he would be to see where that path eventually led. The pain endured, yes, but also the heights reached, the experiences gained, the life ultimately built. Unlike you now, drifting towards sleep in your comfortable modern bed without physical pain or financial worry, Victorian fighters faced their declining years with bodies broken beyond repair and few safety nets if their money ran out. That you escaped the worst fates that befell your contemporaries wasn't just luck. It required foresight, adaptability, and the courage to walk away at the right moment. As sleep approaches, your thoughts grow philosophical. Perhaps boxing's greatest lesson wasn't about fighting at all, but about recognizing when not to fight, when to step back, reassess, find another path forward. The true champions, in the ring and in life, weren't simply those who could endure the most punishment, but those who understood when endurance alone wasn't enough. The bare-knuckle era faded into history, replaced by boxing's more controlled scientific descendant. Similarly, your fighting self, Champion Riley, gradually gave way to the writer, teacher, husband and stepfather who built a different kind of life. Not a perfect life, not without regrets or lingering consequences, but one with its own satisfactions and achievements. As you drift towards sleep, the faces of old opponents and comrades float through your mind. Bennett, Jenkins, Allen, Miller, Ned, Sayers, some long gone, others hanging on like you, all connected by experiences few outside your fraternity could comprehend. The brotherhood of blood and canvas of glory and pain shared in equal measure. Was it worth it? Jenkins had asked that night years ago. Perhaps there is no absolute answer, only the life actually lived with its specific joys and sorrows, triumphs and costs. The path not taken remains forever unknown, its alternative outcomes impossible to calculate. What remains certain is that you lived fully, felt the highest elation of victory and the lowest despair of defeat, experienced fame and obscurity, wealth and poverty, physical perfection and deterioration. The Victorian prize ring, for all its brutality, gave you a life of extraordinary breadth and intensity. And as consciousness fades, one final thought surfaces, that in the end, all fights, whether in the ring or in life, eventually conclude. The bell sounds, the crowd disperses, the boxers return to their corners, night follows day, as it always has and always will. Rest now, in the peaceful knowledge that your fight is complete. And as you, dear listener, drift toward your own peaceful sleep, perhaps consider those Victorian fighters who risked everything for a chance at something better, their world of bare knuckles and London